All right. Our team is gathered for our first April IBB team meeting. We're scheduled to go until 4:15. And so I think we should probably plan to take a break at like 1:15 or 1:30. So someone watch the clock and maybe call us on that. Our facilitator was unable to attend today due to illness. And so offline, Jill Johnson and I have discussed how to go about our meeting today. And what we're going to do is revise our agenda and move things around to issues that we feel like we can discuss and get to a certain point on without the use of a facilitator. We've mutually agreed to go ahead and remove the late resignation issue from the agenda because we are at the very last part of the IBB process on that, on the solution, and we feel like a facilitator would probably be very helpful there. So we're going to put that one on the back burner on the next agenda. And then the next item on our list is an issue that we have already started the IBB process on and discussed. And I wonder if we have notes from that to orient ourselves. That was the issue of our subfill rate and essentially wanting to get it into the best place that we possibly can and thinking about ways that not only the district can ensure that there's adequate subs, and Dr. Schumacher spent some time talking about our relationship with Kelly Services and how we do that and how we make sure that we have the number of subs to meet our needs. But then on the other side of that equation, trying to reduce absences during student days or during contract days, I guess, so we have less need for subs. That also achieves an interest of, if we reduce absence days, allowing teachers to bank days and have those saved for if they need to take leave at any point in time. So our discussion sort of left off with wondering about the possibility of increasing the amount of the temporary leave buyback that happens during the summer as a way to financially incentivize teachers to not use days during the year unless they need to use them, but also to bank those days and have them available. So I think Russ has been considering this and considering what options we would have and also the impact that would have on our operating fund. And I think he's ready if
Correct.
Someone wants to go.
I'll be glad to.
Thank you. Is there anything that anyone else wants to add to my setup? No? Okay. Really? Thanks for joining us today. We're doing some homework.
You can sit here. Sit down.
Yeah. Don't forget you have to turn on the mic so that the recording can pick up your voice. So we just discussed that the team, in coming up with a possible solution to our subfill rate issue, wanted to look at what possibilities we would have for increasing the temporary leave buyback amount. Mm-hmm. And I know you looked into that, and so I wondered if you could share with us the financial ability to do that, methods for doing it, and what impact it would have on our budget.
You bet. So we budget a total of $150,000 for temp leave sellback, and that would include the buyback during the current year and the temp leave that is sold when an employee leaves the district. If they're eligible, you get $50 a day. So we budget for $150,000. So your admin and your certified and your psychs get $50 a day. Your classified and your PAT get $40 a day. We sold back in 2022, $68,000 worth of temp leave was sold back by all pay groups, so that's everybody. And it's ranged over the last 5 years. It went from 86,000 to 75,000, 92,000, 116, and then 68. So it's varied considerably. So right now we're at $50 and we're budgeting about $150,000. Then we probably would just increase that budget. If that $50 amount goes up, we would just budget accordingly into the 23-24 budget.
Can you also talk about, and something that I at least hadn't really deeply thought about as we talked about this, about the difference in implication of going forward only increase versus an increase that would look forward and backwards back to 2008?
Yeah, so we got 2 temp leave buckets prior to 2008 that can only be used for sick leave, and then you got after 2008, which is eligible for the sellback of $50, and then you also have the current year temp sellback at $50 a day. So the after 2008 dollar bucket is something that whatever decisions are made today, future budgets, future generations will pay for that liability. So it just becomes a liability on the books. So whatever the amount that's in that bucket, when that individual leaves the district, then it turns it from a liability into an expense. And so over time, since we started at 2008, you would think that bucket will continually increase and that liability will continue to increase, because each year you add another year of sick leave that is not used or sold back into that bucket. Is that what your answer to that,
Yeah.
Rach? Or?
No, that makes sense. And I don't think we specifically talked about, like, we were like, yes, it makes sense. If we increase it, people will be more incentivized not to use days. And we also said, yes, we'd like a leave system that's as simple as possible. And so then when I asked Russ to look into this and review our joint statement and what the goals were, he was like, well, it's not that simple, because anything you do is going to look backward too. And obviously that is a big number in terms of days from 2008 to the present that are floating out there that people have banked. And so I think if I'm understanding it correctly, we could potentially look at increasing going forward only, but we would have to understand that now we are increasing the complexity of our leave system. And now we have another bucket. So when you pull up your leave days, which, I mean, I can hardly understand when I pull mine up. I'm like, what are all these categories? But we would have to add another one. The system's capable of doing that. We could do it.
Unless our solution was to not just do it going forward, unless our solution was
to do it
to make the amount that you sell it back the same for no matter when.
That would
It would cost.
that would keep away the third bucket. It would
Right.
cost more. So
But we also, you mentioned, I think, and I think Linda actually, well, anyway, I talked to her about this once. The prior to 2008, those, our language was that you had to have a certain number of days
50.
in your bank before you could start selling them back. So that's another thing we could look at, because we wouldn't want to get into the position where staff sell their days every year and then they don't have any when they need to go on leave.
And we had talked about some figures, and
Yeah.
some things, and it gets tricky because you can't do it on one, and we're trying to avoid creating a third bucket. So
Right.
one thing, if we did one possible option, if we threw out a 50% raise, so let's say we raised it to $75 a day that you could sell back, but we also retroed those days that you have banked at 50, and we made all of those $75, right? So you're getting the back end for those that are more conservative. Some people, that's a new term I used, learned YOLO. Some people don't care. They would like to burn that on the front end, so it doesn't matter how much we make that. Their goal is if they've got that money, they're going to cash that out at the end of the year for an end of the year bonus. So if we did a 75-75, that would take all of your $50 days and make them 75 when you sell them back, and that would still create a 50% increase on each year. So instead of getting $500 back, you would get $750 if you had all 10 of your days. But it's really hard to predict or project what's going to help teachers, you know what I mean, to cut down on the sub-fill.
Right.
I'm going to note that because I want to make Stephanie proud is a possible solution that we have generated. You know,
It would create, it keeps the buckets too. We don't create another bucket. So we're actually going back and filling those $50 with 70 if that were it. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I always do that.
No,
I'm the
no, I
worst
just-
IBB ever.
we're going to get really
You're not- you're
comfortable
good.
and I just want to, you know, try and have
Yeah.
some level of fidelity and.
Correct.
I know that it costs the a substitute costs $175 a day. And I know there are other districts where they buy them back for more than $75 a day. And so I would throw out, you know, an amount higher than $75, but again, we're brainstorming solutions, yes?
Can you,
Go ahead.
can you give us like a feasibility on like, is there a level that you're comfortable with, given the impact that this will have on our operating fund? I mean, that's the real question.
Yeah, so like I said, we budget 150 grand, so whatever
Right.
that dollar amount goes up, I'll have to increase the budget, and that'll be budgeted in
Right.
23, 24.
And then when
that
you-
comes out of the big pot of money.
Right, and then you said last year it was, you spent 68,000 out of the 150,000?
Yeah, that's just the buyback program, and then there's another layer on there for the, when employees leave the district, the termination piece.
Okay, so the 150,000 is only for the current 10 temp leave days? Or is the 150,000 budgeted for any kind of
It takes
leave that
into
you sell
account for the
back?
people that are leaving as well. So
Okay.
it's not
'Cause when
only
you
the
were-
payback in June, but it takes into account all the people leaving and/or retiring.
And
It pulls
selling
for
all
that
their
too.
days.
You got it. Not, yes, correct. They're
Was the
selling.
68,000 all pay groups for no matter what kind of leave they were selling back?
Right, but for 2023, those are already in the books, because we pay that out in July. So I budgeted 150, and I spent 154,000, so we went over.
This year?
This year, so we're 4,000 over.
Okay. And I think you said one year, maybe it was the 2021 year, you were up in the hundreds?
116?
Yeah, and I was just thinking back at like, in 2020, in the fall of 2020, do we have a lot of people choosing to resign, retire because of COVID
Yes.
things, and they sold them all back, and, but, I mean, you're showing us in 2023, you already have it that you're going to have 154,000 spent on, okay.
Yeah.
Because, did you, when we all get that email that says, do you want to sell back the remainder of your 10 current temp leave?
Yeah.
Is there a date that we have to answer that by? Okay, and that already passed? Or no?
We have not gotten that email yet.
Oh, I thought we did get the, oh, we got the email about if you wanted to take your summer pay in one
Yes.
check. So we haven't gotten the email yet
Got the
about
lump sum.
selling our
Oh, okay.
days
We got the
back?
lump sum email, not the,
Okay.
Okay. Have we gotten, so we haven't gotten
We've
that
not
buyback
gotten
yet?
the buyback.
Okay,
I was gonna
end of
say-
April. So will that change?
It couldn't because we wouldn't have a ratified agreement by then.
No, I meant like,
Will it
once
change
you,
the budget?
that'll change how much you're spending in this year's? Like, because you said it was 154,000 already, or was that,
That'll go against the 23, 24 budget. 'cause
Got
that-
it.
That will hit July, so we
I
pay
see.
that.
You pay it out after the next year's budget
Yeah,
starts? Okay,
Yep.
okay. And it's all pay groups, so if we just did our pay group with an increase, would you have to, you would adjust it accordingly, right? I mean, you wouldn't,
That would be our recommendation to the board, is to do something for classified and the others as well.
okay. Okay,
You know, I would add that it's something that would be subject to negotiation every year. This is not intended to be a compensation piece as much as it is intended to be a leave piece
Right.
and decreasing the subfill rate issue.
right.
And I think that this could be something on our list that we monitor, we see what level, and then obviously if it's something that has had a positive impact, it may make sense to go back and look at it. But as we know with anything like this, you can always increase, you can never decrease.
Right.
And so, because again, we're getting at the goal of looking at whether this is an impact on our sub-fill rate is something we never tried before, and because it will have a permanent impact on the operating fund and the amount of money available for all pay groups for pay increases, I think that erring on, and because we're looking at going backwards too, to not further complicate the leave system, I think erring in a more financially conservative territory may make sense.
What about the consideration of having it so you must have a certain number of banked days to sell your current 10 temp leave? Because that would encourage people to save their days and bank them so that when they get to a certain amount in their bank, they can start selling their days.
If that's a priority for you,
Well, I just meant
for the member, I mean, that's probably, I mean, it gets tricky. I guess I don't know the history of why we got rid of the 50-day minimum. So
I don't know.
Maybe it was just to put those personal decisions, to give that to each individual employee.
Right.
To see how they wanted to do when you.
Right.
I think when you force people to bank, which I think is smart and conservative
Sure.
and helps them in the future for a rainy day, but it's tough to say, where do you put that number at? You can't cash them until you get 10. You can't cash them until you get 15. And then they may say, hey, these are my days. It gets gray there. There's no doubt. I don't know
That's
why
true.
they stopped it. I just don't.
I don't either.
I like it, Jill. I mean, just personally, I mean, I think
Yeah.
it would be beneficial, but it was not like an initial interest of ours. It was an immediate solution to people taking, leave all throughout the year, but I like it, frankly. I mean, just speaking for me.
I mean, I know there's been sticky situations that HR has to deal with where people have legitimate need to take leave and they don't have paid
Right.
days. And it does create awkwardness or friction.
And we've worked through it, especially in the last couple of years with COVID, of course, where, we've opened up the board sick leave pool. I'll tell you, I mean, for the most part, I mean, I don't want to go there. I like the idea of forcing people into accruing some savings of leave for a rainy day, so that if something catastrophic happens, they're prepared.
If we did that, and again, I don't see this, and I don't think we want to communicate it as a compensation piece, but rather the leave benefit. And I think that makes sense with that. Would we, if you resigned,
I would still say you should be able to
You
sell
should
them
get all
back.
your days.
If you resign, not a late resignation,
'Cause then you don't need
but
to-
a resignation where you put it in before the statutory date, you should still be allowed to sell your days back at whatever amount we agree, or retire, because those are your earned days.
I agree.
But when you allow people to sell back their current 10 days, what if you used all your days, you're in your second year, and now you have 10 more, and you've used 5 of them, and then you're like, oh, I can get money at the end of the year, I'll just sell all 5 again, because I'll get 10 more the next year, and they keep doing that, and then you break your leg, and you can't come to work, or, you know what I mean? That's the things I worry about, because then I hear from the members too, saying, I'm going to get docked, and it's going to be $250 a day, because that's my, daily rate, because I don't have any days left, what can I do?
yeah.
I don't know. I agree, though, with you, Joe. I do see, like, telling them they can't sell them back until they've saved this many would be more strict than what we have now.
It would, if you wanted to start at something lower.
Right.
And then you
like
can, again, if
something
it's going to be
lower.
revisited each year, you're going to get, you could start at something lower, and then that's one of those where somebody may be frustrated at the front end, but be extremely grateful at the back end, and the money's not going anywhere. I mean,
Well, and
it's still
$50 a
there.
day after taxes is like,
Nothing. Well,
$30?
Literally nothing.
30
Yeah.
30 to $35.
So I just mean-
roughly, so.
Correct. But if you get the front end and the back end, it's like we talked about for a
Right.
75, so
yeah.
that's.
Well, what I'm saying is that, like, if we say you have to bank so many before you can sell them back, but your sell back rate is higher, do you know what I mean? It's like
It would
It's a
even
give and
itself
take.
out.
My other question, especially while Russell is how is it budgeted for the amount of sick days that I take as a certified staff? Do you budget for me to take my 10 days every year?
No, we base it just on the historical usage.
Okay.
So I mentioned 150,000, but the true liability is quite a bit higher than that.
Like if every single person were to sell back all 10 of their days?
Yeah.
You
Well,
wouldn't
no,
budget that
my
for a year
question goes
because
more
everybody-
towards
$1 million.
paying for the substitutes. Like, do you budget for me to have a substitute in my classroom potentially for 10 days in a school year?
No.
Does that make sense how I phrase that?
Yes.
Okay.
And in a historical comparison over the last years, we've used Kelly, right? And,
Yeah.
and we've blown past that, I think, every year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've under budgeted and by,
We
Quite a bit,
base it
right?
all on usage. We don't budget the maximum amount.
Okay.
So I don't know if you heard that. So, basically, if you just took every certified teacher and said you got 10 days and you want to sell it all back, that's, $1,060,000 if they
Right.
were to do all that.
But
But in
we don't all have
reality-
10 at the end of the year to sell back because we use them.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right,
Either
yeah.
you're using them or
Right.
selling them back.
Okay.
You bet.
I liked the idea when we talked about connecting it, the buyback amount, connecting it in some way to the sub-pay rate, because it would increase. Or there's something in here that says automatic elevator to raise the pay each year for the buyback amount. I'm looking at our, your SMSD issue statement number 5.
we talked with Russ about that quite a bit.
Yeah?
Because, I mean, we did have a pretty energetic discussion about some possibilities like
Right.
that. And he didn't shoot a hole in it, but he gave us some realistic, I guess, outlook. The liability is what really scared me personally. That down the road, if we were to do something that aggressive, the liability would be such that it could impact what we may be able to do with compensation, because it
Right.
is just one bucket, right?
Right.
So as you start to put more and more liabilities on that bucket, then perhaps the district can't do something as much as they would like to around compensation.
So you'd have two things going on there. You would have, each year you're layering on that one more year of sick leave. But then if you're going to put an escalator in there, that cost is going to always be budgeting more and more for the current year, but also down the road.
Right.
And that comes out of your bucket each year for compensation.
Right.
And-
Do you anticipate increases in what it costs you to have substitutes? Like, does that typically increase each year? Like right now, it's like $175 a day.
Yeah, so, well, I think we have a commitment from Kelly that they're not going to raise their service charge, at least for next year.
Okay.
Okay, so there's that piece. And we just raised daily rates last year.
Right.
So,
Okay. I'm just curious.
It probably stays flat for a while, and then they probably look to renegotiate to reflect their increasing costs, but it's probably like, a long run and then a rise, a long run.
But didn't you raise on Mondays and Fridays as well?
we did some of that, if not all of that. Russell's coming out of ESSER and
Yes.
some of those pieces.
Correct, but which ESSER will be gone
I was
soon.
gonna say,
Right.
so how much
So-
longer do
right.
we have, so.
Gus, do you have a number that again, what would you say would be a safe number, and, I don't know if safe is the right word, but do you have a recommendation for increasing, A, if we look forwards and backwards, and B, if we look forward only and create a third bucket?
If you go backwards, I'm more comfortable with the 75 scenario versus 100 and 100. And that's just because you're taking money out of your bucket when you come back in May 9th, when you're going to talk about compensation.
Right.
And I guess that's, that's for you guys to decide what your priorities are there, but
If you changed it from 50 to 100, would you essentially be doubling from 150,000 budgeted to 300,000?
yeah.
And so what is, that amount of money compared to the overall,
It's small.
budget?
It's small.
Right. So that's what I was looking at. But then also, if we said you had to have 10 days in your bank before you could sell back your current temporary leave, then there might be less people selling it back at first because they haven't saved up 10 days.
That's correct.
Like a first-year teacher wouldn't be able to sell their days back at the end of the year until they'd bank 10.
You might have second year, third year, fourth year.
Well, yes, because
But it doesn't change the amount of money in the bucket, because at some point in time, that 100, the rent will be due. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
as he's talking about for the next CFO or the next person in the future of the district financially, if you put too much at this front end, we don't know what's going to be left at the back end when you make promises that you may not be able to
So
keep.
if we're successful and it really works and people don't spend it and they start to accrue all of these days into that bucket at $100, that's the liability that
That's
I think
correct.
we're
Right.
concerned with, right? So
correct.
if we're successful, it costs us a tremendous amount of money.
But then it saves you from having to have a sub, because the sub's 175 a day, as opposed to, 100 a day, if that was what you were selling your day back for. But also, if it was way in the future, like in 2050, that's a long time away, and you sold them back for $100 a day, that would be it would be worth less than doing it now, but, I was looking more at like the difference between what it costs for a substitute and what it costs, and then what we can sell our day back for, and trying to,
Find a common ground.
find a common ground between them.
Yeah.
Not necessarily an equal, I'm not saying, because that would be, an increase over 300%. But,
Jill, did I hear you say you would be interested in a 10-day build-up before to sell back?
yeah, I was even going to say 5, but then you said 15, so I was like, well,
I was gonna say, I would say anywhere
10.
between 10 and 15. That's gonna take the average teacher probably 3 to 4 years to accrue anyway, just based on just tons of other things. Like, if they have small humans, they're probably gonna use 3 or 4 days a year just on sick leave for their small humans. And then if they get sick, so it's gonna take a little bit to do that. But 10 to 15, I feel like is reasonable, because at that point,
Right.
if anything too crazy does occur, they would then have a fallback. And then if we increase the rate, so. I would say at least 10, personally.
Okay.
Don't let me.
I'm comfortable
Don't let me
at
speak
10.
for anybody.
I think when you're in a situation where you need leave, 10 days is not many days.
Right.
Usually if it's a situation where, you have a medical issue or a family member with a medical issue, you're looking at significantly more than 10 days. So I feel like we're in this point of, talking around the numbers of 75 to 100. The difficulty is that, again, comes out of the big bucket. It impacts compensation. And it's, while, the numbers we're talking about in the hundreds of thousands in relation to that fund are not big, it's a big, that's still a big move from going from 50, whether you're going to 75 or 100. That's going to be a big change. And I think, I don't know, I feel like I would have some regret if we doubled it and then it turned out to not have a good impact on the sub-fill rate. I think that's my concern, is if we double it without having any data or information as to whether that achieved what we were looking at, even 1 year of data. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just worry about making a move that big without having any look back.
I'd be more comfortable with 100, but we wouldn't be able to retro the 50s. At 75, if you're taking all of your buyback that you currently have saved, and you're turning all those from 50 to 75, and you're still going to 75 on the front end, you're getting it both on the backside and the front. So, you're
I see what you're
you're
saying.
winning on both sides with that scenario.
yeah.
That's where I'm at. And I keep going back, and I don't know enough to speak very intelligently about it, but again, it's more than just the doubling of the 150 to 300 this year. It's the potential of having this tremendous cost down the road that a future board, all of us, would have to be dealing with.
Well,
If you made the 100 retroactive into the old bucket, right?
But I'd be interested in the number of days that are accumulated by current district employees from 2008. So how many days are we talking about that are sitting there that we're raising by 50% if we raised those to 75? We would still keep the buckets the same, pre-2008 and that, but I just wonder, what does that number look like?
34,000 days, $1.7 million.
And they wouldn't be able to sell them back until
They left
End
or
of
retired,
employment.
yeah.
And they still have to be eligible. In your P and A, you have some
By a certain date,
criteria in there.
right?
So that would go to 3.4 million as far as a liability. So
Yes.
just immediately be 3.4
If everyone was
million.
like, bye, we're leaving, pay us for our day. Sorry. But I mean, eventually, I see what you're saying, yeah, I mean, it's not gonna happen all at once.
And we paid out 86,000 for your after 2008 bucket in 2022. So 86,000 was paid out of that bucket when a teacher left
Last
Were these
year.
teachers the ones
last
leaving
year.
at the end of the 2022, like
Yeah.
May?
Yeah.
Okay,
All employees that left was $86,000 that came out of that.
selling their days back.
So that in itself, if that were, let's say it's the same this year, well, let's look at next year, it would increase by 50%. So that would
Yeah.
go by
43.
$43,000.
If we chose to
If you
go to
chose to go,
75.
correct.
Yeah. I'd like to be able to do things before, where we say, we'll try something for a year. Well, I would like this to be from here forward, but revisit as something to look at. I mean, because, yeah, it's not compensation, but it does take money from the budgets, from the budget. But I do know I've heard, every year I kind of hear from people, well, is this going to be brought up? Or is it going to increase? Will it happen before I choose to retire? Will, things like that. So
Well, because
I
there's just no incentive.
I do know it's an
at this
important
point.
thing. Yeah.
There's little to no incentive on people just not using their days. So, which, sorry.
Which, no, and I-
How?
no, well received.
Yeah.
Like, I understand. I'm a person who uses my days, so I understand. I think, and I've said this before, I do think there's a balance between, we don't want to financially disincentivize people either from using days if they need to use them.
Right.
So at some point, you make that so high that people do start to see it as part of their compensation. Let's say especially if they decide to take all of their summer pay up front, and then that's a payment they could get during July or whenever it gets paid out. So I also go on the side of, it's for you to use, and I would want to balance that. So don't make it so high that someone's like, oh, I
I'm
need to
sick,
go
but
in
I'm
with a
coming to
cold,
work.
because I would really like to get that compensation piece in the summer. I'd rather us focus on putting the dollars we have available on actual compensation, so that if people need their day for whatever their reason is, because we've said your reason is a good reason in Shawnee Mission, then they use it.
I would throw out the other piece that has been mentioned, is that if it were raised to $75 retro, and you have, say, 100 days in your bank, so that goes up to that, but that also comes into your, not only a lump sum when you do leave, according to the P&A, but that also goes towards your retirement, which is the gift that keeps on giving.
And that's what I was trying to make sure of. Does it
Yes.
actually add to the retirement?
Yes.
I cannot represent.
Capers,
Okay, because I've
Up
heard
to
two different
capers, too.
things.
Well, need to clarify, but it's the July 1st, 1993, or after, I don't think it gets added on, because it's
Right.
an add-on. But if you're prior to that, you're grandfathered in, and it does count towards your,
So it depends on your tenure or the amount of years of
Yeah.
service you
How many
have.
people do we have that were hired before 1993? I'm sorry, I'm not, sorry, I didn't mean that.
That's
I
okay.
just was curious.
It's like,
it's actually when you entered
no, I'm.
capers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I wasn't here, but I started capers like on, I don't know, January or August of 92. So I made it by 6 months. So my add-ons,
So like
Give
the
those in your percentage.
buyback of your days wouldn't increase your, what do they call that? Your top three
your average salary.
average salary. But, I mean, it's still,
Yeah, more money is always
It's
better.
yeah.
So, I think I would propose a solution of increasing the temporary leave buyback amount effective as of our next P&A, so as of the next school year, to $75 for all all temp leave buyback, whatever you have.
Does that include prior to 2008?
Or are we starting?
I don't know how many people, how,
You can't sell back your prior to 2000.
that's what I'm asking. Are we interested in,
No. Not the
We haven't run
not,
those numbers.
not prior to 2008, right?
If you have more than 50 banked prior to 2008, you get $25 back.
right, I was wondering how many days are in that
Category.
pool? How many, like, I don't have any days prior to 2008. Well, I don't, I mean,
No, I know, I'm
was,
just laughing at the way you said, some of us graduated high school then, so.
oh, good,
So I don't have.
I was here.
No, I mean, I think when Russ did the math on the impact on the operating fund, we were not looking at pre-2008. Now, obviously, that is a complexity in our leave system. But it is a low liability right now because of that requisite number of days you had to have banked.
Right,
Oh, yeah. 7,900 days in the, prior to 2008.
more than I thought.
And are those all
I
people
don't have
that,
I don't have a dollar amount. I guess you just times 25?
Yep.
So, yeah, I was wondered, for those staff, those are days that they'll, if they don't
So no.
ever use them, they won't ever, it's almost like lost days, you know what I mean? Because they have to have 50 in order just to sell them back,
Anything over 50, you can sell back.
right?
So you have 50.
But you're only gonna get $25 for them anyway. So it's not, okay, yep.
so there's, that number, is that everybody who had at least 50? Or is that just,
In general, total
that's just in
days.
general?
That's just total. I don't know how many people have 50.
And it was 7,900
Yeah.
So we don't-
7,900 days.
days?
Yes.
each of the 50.
And then you have to have whatever John said to be able to.
You have to have 50
be eligible.
banked
So
from
there's
that
sort of
time
an
period.
do you have a budget item for that right now?
It probably just comes out of that $150,000.
Okay,
That's not very much
so
money.
if, let's just, I mean,
No, you're
again,
good.
I can't make, I'm just throwing out crazy solutions. I don't know, because I personally hate when I look at my leave days and I'm like, there's so many different things. So let's just, go there. What would we have to make, what would you increase that budget item for if we did something with those pre-2008 days? Similar to what we're talking about for post-2008 days.
Yeah, I don't know.
But would they still have to have the 50 banked in order to get anything?
That would be safer.
Because that would also then determine, because like, how many people pre-2008 still have 50 bank days from that time period?
So you can use them no matter what, right? I need to
But
take leave,
they're the last
payment.
ones to be used. So you use all your current temp, then you use all your days from
2000.
after 2008, and then if you used all those, then you could use the ones from prior to 2008. So some of them just never even get used.
Since we're throwing out solutions.
Like $500,000.
Yep. So I think was the intent with that previous bucket just to let it eventually just run out, and then we're just operating eventually with just one bucket?
Yes. Could they
So-
start using those just as sick days prior?
Well,
Sorry. Go ahead.
I guess I would suggest as a solution, keep that, don't touch that.
Okay.
And we're just talking about the after 2008 bucket.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And let that one go. Eventually it goes away, and then we only have one bucket
Because
eventually.
eventually you won't have staff that have days.
Right.
Correct.
Anymore. Okay.
I did some math, the numbers come out very large.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I did too.
I had used my calculator, Jill probably did it in her head.
No, no, I did not. I put it, I opened it on my screen.
Oh, you did, I saw you, I lied.
So did we agree that we would look at a possible $75
So,
a day?
but with some caveats, so potentially look at a required bank of 10 days, but also maybe perhaps then a collective commitment to have, I don't know what, a joint issue or something the next time we negotiate, where we will pull the data about the impact that that has had and talk about whether we're at the right amount or whether it was so positive that we want to talk about what are, look at comparable districts and look at what incentives that provided and where it put, because I do like when we follow up and test things. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. And I would suggest that if we come to consensus that involves something that's more conservative, and by conservative, I mean as compared to the daily subrate amount we pay, that we have a commitment to look at it again.
Yeah. I think if we look at it as 75 a day, then just start with that and not
Not do the bank.
a requirement to be able to sell them back.
Yep.
Kind
I
of
mean,
like
I
a
think,
small
to me,
step.
I think that you speaking on behalf of what is best for, I mean, obviously, we have some interest in making sure that people protect themselves,
Yes.
but we can educate, we can make sure people know that what their leave options are and the importance of banking. Whether there's a sort of false protection there or not, I think is, I would definitely listen to what you think.
Be okay with that.
So right now, this solution that we are discussing would just be and this amount is listed in the P&A.
I have it if someone wants to pull up up there and make sure I'm capturing it before you say it. Jill, do you want to project?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I'm just waiting for the actual one to pop up. There we go. 9.2.
And it's at the very bottom.
Make it larger.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we would take out that second line.
This one?
Yes. So no required banking. And it would be simplified to increasing by 50% from $50 to $75 per day for all temporary leave buyback, whether you've banked it or whether you're accruing it this year. And then I think we would do this separately. So I think we would have a TA on line number 1, would be a TA, because we do TAs if we're going to change contract language.
So can you put an "and" in there? Because it makes it look like it's only one, and this is also retro. So when you put $75 per day for all temp leave and buyback.
Yeah.
That shows that it's two different areas that we're increasing.
We'll do this. We call it the current temp leave. That's the 10 days.
Correct,
And that you can do back each year.
correct,
Then we have the banked temp leave.
yes.
And that's upon
Bank temp leave,
resignation or retirement.
banked temp leave after 2008.
Yep.
Okay.
Did we not set the 10 days?
No.
When I was thinking about that, I was thinking to help offset if we were to double the amount from 50 to 100, how to offset that cost by making people accrue days first. I do think it's important, but I also was thinking there might be some people that say, well, now I can't sell my 10 days back, and I used to be able to.
Right.
And now you made it so I can't until I
You're-
save the days.
That's going to happen whenever you decide to do
I know.
that one.
But
That's
I also
true.
think from a research standpoint, I mean, if we add in too many factors, we don't know which one helped us,
Correct.
right?
Right, so just do one thing and see what happens.
We can also do this and then like poll for next year to see exactly where people are standing on it, because can't hurt.
So then the first part we have under the solution, that would be a TA. And then I think we would have a collective commitment to come back and look at data and determine if this solution was effective in decreasing the number of subs needed on a daily basis. And again, hopefully the goal is if you're just, taking a personal day for whatever, catch up on shopping or, but still, if it's a day that you need for any real purpose, then obviously people should still be taking that. So the goal is not to get, to where people are taking 0 to 1 days a year, but to get to a place where it's possible for us to have a high sub fill rate.
I think with us going back to 2008, I don't think it hurts us in retention either. I mean, if you're a long-standing employee and you've got a pretty decent bank, you may stay with us longer, rather than going to another
That's true.
district.
Right.
Does anyone have any alternative solutions or possible adjustments to this solution that they want to talk about before we take a thumb check? I don't know what she calls it.
I'm good with it.
Okay, do we want to do a check and see where everyone feels about this solution by indicating, great, I can live with it, or I can't live with it? Go. Awesome. And I think, if I'm remembering, does everyone feel like that completes this? I mean, it was a district issue that we noticed, but do we feel like between the presentation from Dr. Schumacher and this, that we can close out this issue for this year?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right, I would propose that we go ahead and take like a 10 or so minute break. And then when we come back, I think we can just start walking through the IBB process on staffing.
Staffing.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll just do it till we get to, as far as we feel like we can go. All right, thanks, guys. Okay. We have spent some time on, although Stephanie instructs us to consider them joint issues, but at least we've spent some time on issues that were noticed or raised by the district. And so now we're moving on in our schedule to issues that were noticed or raised by the association. And it looks like we already have their issue statement pulled up. And so I'll just let whoever on the team go ahead and introduce it. And then we can work on framing and focusing.
All right. Our issue statement number 6 is focusing on staffing and caseloads, and our issue statement is just how do we attract and retain staff, which is
Then we started focusing.
yeah, and we have moved on to focusing the issue focus and putting some stuff in, particularly around SPED, because if you look back at our late resignations, that tends to be where we lose people. So. We've talked about potentially adding language for 4 paperwork days, because those come out of the ESSER funds, so eventually that will go away, and it would be nice to get language in our agreement about that. And then just a discussion and potentially language around SPED schedules and caseloads, focusing on when it comes to 6 classes, seminars, number of preps that we're teaching, especially with our co-teachers and those at the elementary level, I know is something that we need to discuss. SPED caseloads, especially when it comes to our elementary, and what happens when there's an open position in the building, because when that occurs, there's a lot of paperwork that ends up being distributed, because subs obviously cannot do that paperwork for us. Yeah.
Yeah, there's solutions in here.
Possible
Sorry.
solution would be to add a SPED stipend. The unified pre-K, their special education, I don't know much about that. Amber, if you want to talk briefly.
So on the caseload, when we were originally approached about this, it was going to be a 5 to 10, 5 SPED kids to 10 peer models,
Oh, okay.
or gen ed, whichever. And so with that, unfortunately, every year when you're having students come in, you're identifying more kids for services. And so around that, you're increasing your SPED caseload there. Also with them, they are working 5 days. So they're technically doing 2 jobs. They're doing a SPED job, and they're teaching the pre-K curriculum, along with teaching 3-year-olds, sometimes the 3-year-old curriculum, and then also teaching the 4-year-old curriculum, along with ELL. And so taking into account, like they're doing a lot. And so I think that that's really putting a strain on that group of employees in our early childhood center. And of course, I have some solutions around that, but looking at how we can better appreciate those people and lessen the workload on them.
Do we want to continue, or do we want to kind of take a minute and look over, because it's a lot. This one's big, obviously.
I think we can keep, I can talk about
Yeah, let's go through the
Sure.
whole issue statement.
The next one on there, it's a secondary number of
Preps and different.
preps and different curriculums. What I mean by that, and actually Todd Dane probably has experienced this at South, I haven't heard from a lot of people on it, but because I did have, worked with somebody that had 5 different preps, which is not, there's multiple people that have 5 different preps, but the difference with this one was that 4 of the different preps was in a language, and then the 5th prep was in a different curriculum. It was in social studies. And so they just were struggling that, to have 2, different fields, being being a foreign language, but also being a social studies teacher, and have 5 preps. Our language previous to teaching 5 classes out of 7, previously we still have it, but the language said, if you taught 4 preps or more, then you'd only teach 5 classes. Back when everyone taught 6. So now that language is moot, right? It's everyone in the secondary, that's gen ed, is teaching 5. So that language doesn't do anything for people that have 4 or more preps, right? And so not necessarily thinking we need to, just kind of discussing that in a sense, what that workload is like with 5 preps that are not all in the same, would we call it curriculum?
Yeah, or subject matter.
Department.
Can you explain to me, literally, as someone who's completely ignorant on this, is that prep the same? Like, is that
No,
a
no,
teacher
5
literally develop? No, I mean,
Oh.
for the classroom teacher versus a sped teacher, like, I guess I just assumed that the classroom teacher was responsible for the class prep, and the sped teacher was responsible for the provision of the services outlined in the IEP is connected to that. So to what extent, what does it actually look like on the ground? Because that would just be my assumption,
Right.
is that the classroom teacher is responsible.
This one right here is the one where I talk about the number of preps in different departments or curriculums. That is actually gen ed.
Yeah, that one's just a gen ed scenario.
But to answer your question about that is, I would say that there would be an expectation for the sped teacher to plan with the gen ed teacher when they can.
So when it comes to co-teaching,
you know.
ideally it does work, I got you. Ideally, it does work best when we're able to sit down and co-teach and plan, because we should be seen as equals within the classroom with the kiddos. And we try really hard within the special education department to not have like my kids versus your kids. So we do sit down and attempt to plan, and having multiple preps does make that hard. But that ideally we would be we'd be planning together, therefore the accommodations and modifications and stuff can be made while we're doing that. And, I mean, obviously, they're also done on the fly within the classroom based on the student's need.
Okay.
But to sit down with whoever, all the people that you are co-teaching with would be best. That way we can go ahead and get out in front of accommodations.
So that makes total sense to me.
No, you're good.
And this line about secondary number of preps in different curriculums, that is for 5 preps, you're all in one subject area, but you're also certified in history, and so that gets tacked on.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Oh, keep,
So I was just going to add in there, we're talking about gen ed,
yeah.
right? Yeah, so I think as it applies to our co-teaching model, the preps that our special education case managers are working through, they're creating a new lesson for every learner, not every class. And so the prep and the work for them is significant. And we have several in the secondary world that are teaching 6.
Which that probably goes back to our understanding of how we define caseload for special education teachers, right?
Which is different, right?
Right, okay. Okay. All right, I'm following.
It's okay, you're not, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Do specialists and sped people with the art, PE, I think you guys were talking about
Yeah,
FTE
Amber, do you have more on that, or? Okay, yeah, I can go with that one. And this one, I'll say I don't have as much knowledge as well as a general classroom educator, so please pipe in with some of
I think it was
our-
more looking at equity with FTE. So could we have people in the same building with the same number of sections that are different FTE? So one specialist teacher is a full-time, but the other one's a .9. Is that, I've heard of times when it's happened, so I want to make sure that it doesn't, or can we make a definition on how do we know when you're a 1.0 in an elementary building with regards to PE, library, music, and art? How many sections? Yeah.
Okay, I can
go
go
ahead.
with the elementary plan. We have this in there because as of right now, our contract language has it worded as plan minutes per week. So essentially, right now, I don't want to call it a loophole, but kind of a loophole that if something were to come up, a plan time could be made up on a different day. So for X, Y, or Z, you didn't get your plan time on Tuesday, well, then that plan time could be made up on Wednesday. But when we think about our purposes of that plan time for preparing daily, there's an interest in having daily plan time minutes rather than have that as a weekly plan time minute. Does that make sense how I explained that? Okay.
And then lastly, no, you're good. Instructional coaches, just a few have reached out and mentioned that they would like a contract that's similar to counselors where if they need to work additional days, that way they can do so. And then counselors and social workers just getting compensation for covering during plan time.
Which that's kind of an interesting one because a counselor and a social worker are part of our bargaining unit, so they're covered by our agreement, right, our P&A. And so they would, if they were secondary, then they're guaranteed one plan time per day. If they're elementary, they would get 230 minutes of plan time a week. And we've had a couple times where when we're low on subs, having a counselor or a social worker cover classes, but because they don't have a schedule that outlines when their plan is, they wouldn't be compensated for covering during their plan. So kind of that issue and how to make it feel more, I guess, equitable. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna,
So it's a lot.
I'm gonna start off the bat with just an organizational
Yeah,
thing.
please.
Yeah,
Do it.
okay, because so it sounds like what's happened here is you guys have tried to capture the feedback from the whole of your bargaining unit that relates to kind of like, staff load and casing and caseloads and basically amount of work. Therefore, this is a very, detailed issue statement with lots of minor components. Some of them, which a possible solution could involve an increase in compensation or have a monetary piece to it. I think maybe what might make sense to tackle this is just to start a discussion about organizationally how we go about this. And so perhaps we look at, are there things that we can carve out as like discussion items for this group, awareness items, have individuals come in and say, this is how we do about this, how we assign this. And yes, we will take these concerns into consideration as we plan and prepare for next year. Are there other things that we need to divide off and maybe even potentially send to some sort of subcommittee to say, do we want to look at this and make recommendations for compensation that again would then have to come up and considered when we're working with that piece of the pie. That's my initial off the bat idea organizationally, but I haven't had a lot of time to think through it. So if anyone
No,
else
you're good. It's a lot.
has more ideas for because I feel like if we just start the IBB process on all of this, we're going to talk for 3 hours and not actually get to anything. So I'm just wondering, like, maybe it makes sense to take all the SPED issues and put that in a subcommittee, and then other things that are maybe more of a human resources subcommittee, because there will probably be things here where we can have awesome solutions. There are probably going to be things that it's like, these are the challenges we face in running public school, but does anyone else have any ideas about how we?
Yeah, I do think it's good to organize it so that we can make sure we're utilizing our time and being efficient.
Yeah.
Not necessarily fast, just
Yeah.
efficient, yeah.
Well, and again, like, if we're talking about how SPED caseload is managed and all of this stuff, we need Sherry Dumoulin there. Like, I don't know how that works. I don't know how the practicalities of that are.
Yeah.
I don't know how master schedules are made, I mean, so
Very carefully.
it seems like we have issues
yeah.
primarily with SPED and then some other categories. I don't know, Dr. Schumacher, what were you gonna?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything of what you said. I think we need some organization around it. Should we as a team, though, also try to come up around like true interest statements? I agree with Rachel that these are things that we can discuss, we should discuss, but it's just, I don't know if there's interest here. It's like very clearly heard from all of these different people, but what's the interest?
Right, a manageable workload, I would say,
Yeah.
Okay.
so that we can attract and retain our staff.
That makes sense?
I know that if Stephanie were looking at it, it would be a lot of solutions or positions or,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
And that's where I'm at. I mean, I'm
Right.
not surprised by any of these, but if we're going to truly IBB them, I think we need to be able to reflect back once we start into the real work on what are the interests, what are
Right.
the true interests that we're trying to
Right.
solve.
So yeah, like for instance, a manageable workload, having those 4 paperwork days right now helps with that. The SPED department, I've only heard positive things. We want to keep that. So how do we keep that? Right? Yeah, that's for one item.
Yeah.
I've heard, when we do have an open position in a building, we hear that it adds work to their workload with regards to helping get those IEPs finished, helping, take data, and how can we have a discussion about how to help with that additional workload.
So these were essentially all workload type issues.
Yes.
Essentially, the way certain things are structured, I think could be structured better to make my workload more manageable. Because there's such a variety, like, it's hard to come up with, I mean, obviously, there's sort of ideal world things that come into mind. Like, I'm sure ideally, the board and the administration would say the schedule works out in perfect ways, and we don't have staffing shortages, and, we don't have sort of these issues that are listed here. Okay, I'm trying to think.
I think we need, I like your suggestion too, Rachel. I think we need a report from Sherry. I think we need to give her an opportunity to put something together.
Yes. I'd love to see I know she talked last year about kind of the average caseload, and they were trying to get it lower, right? And so I'd love a,
And she can
update.
speak to the paperwork days.
Yes.
Are you talking about just an ongoing stipend to serve in a special education role?
We've seen it in other districts. Yes,
No, I've
that's a solution.
No, I've heard that being done.
I don't know how that doesn't necessarily lessen your workload, but it.
Should we make a list of things that are?
It tracks.
That are compensation related and put them in a,
Yes.
okay, so
Sure.
that would be one that's compensation.
Does anyone want to type on there?
So we're gonna save for compensation, the issue of a stipend for special education staff, but I also think that I would like to hear feedback from Sherry as to her view on that. Does that help her in staffing? What do her colleagues who run special education departments think about that? We know there's a sped shortage, like, that's absolutely a true fact, and so I think I'd like to hear from her is that a good use of our funds available for payroll increases essentially.
And I would ask Pam and Jeremy to be a part of that too.
Yep.
From an HR director
Yep.
lens.
Okay.
Pam and,
Yeah.
as well as counselors and social workers.
You said the instructional coach part, yeah.
Because there's already a supplemental group working, right?
Yeah.
Yep, we meet tomorrow.
You do?
Yep.
So
For
I
a second
feel
time.
like we probably, to not put the cart before the horse, need to have some discussion about whether those things make sense to add to the, right? Like, do we think that monetizing these things makes sense and achieves interest? And then before we send it to that committee to look at, right? Because if we send it to that committee, the assumption is that that's happening, and we want to make sure we have a full discussion of that first.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that the sped stipend is a possible solution. However, I think there's other things too that help lessen someone's workload as opposed to compensating them for additional work, right? So I don't know that I would want to send that to the subcommittee.
So that's probably
Well, our subcommittee's really generated towards
coaching.
Yeah, sponsors.
sponsors,
and
activities,
coaches.
coaching.
Yeah,
Got it.
Things that you do outside the contract day
right.
typically.
Exactly. Yes. I
So that's probably something for then Sherry to talk about with human resources and come back and present, I assume,
Yes.
on SPED, instructional coach.
And
counselors, and
and
social workers.
truthfully, the instructional coach thing also, I mean, we do have part of our negotiated agreement already that talks about hourly pay for things that you do outside of the contract day, right? And so, if there are expectations for them to have more than a 187-day contract, that's kind of what we're talking about. But if there's not an expectation that they are, working more than, more days at the beginning of the year or, whatever, then that's different. But I think what you were saying is you've heard that there's somewhat of an expectation to work with the admin on things that happen prior to the start of the school year.
Okay, so the frame and focus for the instructional coach issue is their 187-day contract, and whether there is an expectation that they work beyond that, and then how we either ensure that that expectation is not there if they aren't being compensated, or that if it is there, it's something we want, have flexibility to allow that in the contract.
Correct.
Okay. Are you, Dr. Schumacher, is that an issue that has been on your radar?
Yes. Yep. And I've spoken with Dr. Gonzer about it, so I would ask her
Okay,
to be a representative there.
okay. Dr. Gonzer, okay. And then I want to make sure I understand on the next one of social workers. So right now, I'm a counselor in a building. I get plan time.
Yeah.
What's happening
So
there?
I think what happens is they don't set a specific time of day that they're like, this is my plan time, no students can come to my office. Because of their job. They're a
Right.
counselor, they're a social worker. If there's a student in crisis, they want to see them. And so when we had a low fill rate for one day, they might be asked to substitute in a class more often than they had been in the past. And we're told, you won't be compensated for it because you're not doing it during your plan. But that's just because you didn't have like a.
It's because your plan time is
Is
flexible.
yes. And so they were just really feeling inequity in that. Whereas, I mean, the last person they're going to ask is a classroom teacher to sub during their plan because, by the agreement, you would pay them. And I know that the principals don't want to have to do that anyway because you want people to be able to have their plan, right, to do all the things they need during the day, so.
I would say, I don't know what happens in every building, but we would ask a teacher on plan to cover a class before we ask the counselor or social worker.
Okay, okay.
That's our typical protocol.
And I'm not sure that's the same in elementary.
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
Well, you don't-
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have social workers, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's social worker instead. I do see our social worker, again, very isolated to my building, but I do see our social worker typically on our morning updates. When we have low sub-fill rates, she's usually one of the ones on the
Subbing.
coverage.
Okay.
I know at least for my building, and I would say most, that's the last line of defense is our social workers. We'll do interventionists or eye coaches before social workers, so.
And maybe that's, I don't know, there's probably a lot of solutions to that one. Whether it's coaching for administrators to make sure there's consistency in the practices that Chrissy and Todd just described. But yeah, there's probably a lot of solutions there. Okay. Okay, so we've kind of been working up. So the issue of elementary plan time, it's stated in the P&A
As minutes per week.
as minutes per week.
For elementary, yeah. For secondary, it's 1 period per day. And then on a block, a 2-day block, it's 1 block period per 2 days
Okay.
for high school.
Now, we may be coming with a different solution, is that right?
Yes, that's true. You mean different than the 230 minutes?
And different than what you have here too, right? Where, with our subcommittee,
Right,
because weren't we talking about saying that that's all planned?
yeah. Yes, and I agree. I think what Nolan was saying is that because it's a per week, you could get that plan, it could happen 4 days out of the 5, that you get the number of minutes for the week, and then the 5th day, not have a plan.
So
I don't know if
for
that's happening a lot,
I would say in my building about once a month.
Okay.
I do see it. Typically, it's for special events that happen, that then a plan time gets pushed off a day, and then I have a member asking me about it. But our contract language, again, says that it's the 230 per week rather than an individual, or not individual, daily plan. And that can create, it's rough those days.
So how is that made up?
But then, but they're getting 250 though, right? Aren't most of them getting 250?
230. Because of the PLC, yeah, 230.
Oh, okay, yep, that's right.
So that may be possibly something to send the committee working on the calendar, like, to that subcommittee. Now, I think that you're gonna have to have a discussion about whether that removal of flexibility is problematic. Like, we never wanna set up a situation where we're just gonna be drawing grievances right and left. If it's something that's not practical or possible to facilitate, I don't know.
For the classroom teacher, a per-day plan would happen when you send your kids to specials. And I think
Right.
what you're saying is that sometimes there might be a plan where you send your kids to specials and then you're doing something because of some special event that's going to happen.
Right.
And so you miss out on that plan time while your kids are at their specials, but sometime during the week, the principal makes up for it.
So what
On
would we
another
do
day.
if we didn't have an ability to make up for it?
Well, what if we didn't have the ability to take away the plan in the first place
Yeah.
on that day? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Can you explain that, say that again, I'm sorry.
and maybe you're doing a better job of,
So my best example, and I have to be careful how I word this, again, it could be unique to my building as well, but I've heard other kind of grumblings outside of my building too, is we do what's called Mustang Families. And it's a great program where we're coming in and bringing kids in and doing SEL lessons. The problem is somebody a certified teacher in my building will have to not give up because it'll be made up, but it'll happen during their plan time because we need the whole building to do this at one time. And then they're not getting a plan time potentially that day.
so then they get it made up. at
And so then
another
it'll
day.
get made up because of logistically, it might be made up later in that week, or it would be made up later in the week.
Okay, so you're
rather
saying a
than-
proposal where it's just, there is no makeup. You get your 50 minutes per day.
Per day.
Correct.
Instead of a certain amount of minutes per week.
Is that flexibility something that, Chrissy, you think is needed in the elementary world?
I mean, the flexibility's nice, but I just have not experienced where teachers don't have that 50, I mean, they
Yeah.
all have it.
Okay.
And I've experienced it with other smaller, more like once-a-year situations. We used to bring in, again, great opportunities for our kids, but we would bring in people from the community, and we'd have people in the community speak. But then we have that going on throughout the entirety of the day, so it's trickier to get a plan time that day. Or this is a very unique situation too, but we were doing a whole school picture, and I lost my plan time that day to be part of the picture.
Okay.
So little things like that were, I don't know, it's hard for me as a certified staff because I want to be part of those events, but at the same time, I need that daily plan time.
Well, and typically if we have like an assembly or something and it's during somebody's plan time, the specials teachers
Yes.
are with the kids.
Yeah, and that's not, what I'm talking about isn't related to assemblies necessarily, because yeah, you're right, in my building it's the same way.
And like families, we would do that during morning meeting time.
Right.
Okay.
But again, I don't know if that's the same at every building, because that's not how my building schedules that. So again, I don't want to be hyper-focused on one building, but that is just a trend I'm seeing.
Well, just by having it as 50 minutes per day, you're solidifying that's what's given. So.
I like your suggestion, Rachel, of taking it back to our subcommittee, because I'm just checking my thinking, but I thought that we had a potential recommendation to this group that we would guarantee a potential.
Yeah.
The 250
Right.
across the week.
Right. Yeah, and I think that the comparison is just, elementary has it as a certain amount of minutes per week, where secondary has it as a planned period per day. I mean.
So it's how it's stated.
Yes.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I mean,
If it's not an issue in a lot of buildings, if it's
Right.
just some, maybe that can be worked out,
Addressed.
within a building as well. But it is a difference
But
between.
if it's only an issue in one building, then why can't we figure out a way to make that work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then protect that time.
For future potential.
For your
Yeah.
for your elementary staff.
so maybe before we worry about the subcommittee, perhaps that is an issue. I'm going to start making notes after each one of these, if everyone's okay, so
Yeah,
we
you're
don't
good.
lose track
Yeah,
of
you're
anything.
good.
Is that something that it makes sense for directors of elementary to look at and like say, this is the expectation district-wide, this is where we are, and then we can like come back and talk about, are those the best people to like look at that?
Probably. They have access to all the principals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe send to them, and I would like to hear from them as to whether they see this as something that through, coaching, like a problem can be eliminated, or through language in the handbook, the administrative handbook, or whatever it may be. But then also have them present a little bit on why does it say 230 minutes? Like, why is it stated per week at elementary? And maybe they have a reason and maybe they don't, but,
I think there's other districts
it's
that do it a number of minutes per week as well. I guess on the other side, I wonder if there's secondary teachers that wonder why they don't have a specific number of minutes, and
Right.
instead they just have one period a day.
right.
So maybe trying to make it the same between secondary and elementary is not necessarily.
They're different worlds,
Easy.
and I would like to, I think we do need to hear about it. There's a reason at some point in time that was put like that in there. Maybe those reasons still exist, or maybe they don't.
But I do agree, yes, Mike, you're right. We do have a potential solution to this, in a sense, yes, with this subcommittee.
Perhaps, is it possible solution with calendar subcommittee? Okay.
It's the mega.
And I don't want to complicate the issue, but since I think we're in a situation at the secondary level where we're closer to, full block scenario where it's not really realistic, where we have secondary teachers with a daily
That's true.
minutes of plan.
That's true, it's
So-
really just middle school.
Right, so
Which is its own thing.
I don't want to create another issue, but there's, we
That's
don't really
true.
have daily minutes of
Because you
plan
have
at the high school.
4 days a week of block.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you really have 3 days a week of plan.
Yep.
Correct.
But a total of 2 blocks and 1
Yes.
traditional.
The goal is to balance
Yep.
the plan time for all teachers within a week.
Okay, can someone remind me for instructional coaches where we're sending that?
Dr. Gonger is going to talk about it with us, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then what about counselors and social workers?
I don't know. I would like, wasn't there a document that talked about when you do need to have someone fill in as a substitute, where you start?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Yes, we do have it, and we send it to principals, and that's what Christy and Todd were talking about, that's what guides them, and it's the
Right.
last resort. And it sounds like, at least from them and their buildings, it is a last resort.
Okay. So maybe a review of that.
Yeah, we can do that. I can take the lead on that and
Okay.
at least try to get a feedback from
Okay.
Dr. Higgins and Ms. Lewis on how frequently that's occurring.
Would they need to talk to principals
They
to find
would.
out how frequently? Okay.
100%, yep.
Yeah.
And I would say that, although we've seen continue issues with unfilled positions and subs, now that at the high school, we're back to teaching 5, it's a lot easier to come up with a game plan
Right.
to cover those classes as compared to when everyone is teaching 6.
Right, because the people that are on a student support hour
Correct.
can be
It's a
used.
good clarification. Do you guys think it's mainly at the elementary that we're asking social workers to do this?
I've heard from counselors at the middle and high.
Okay. I'll check with
But
Ron too.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I think it was also, have instructional coaches and innovation specialists been asked as well?
I'm sure that's happening.
Yeah. Do they have specific
is.
plan time in their schedule? Like a specific time of day?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay. Just wanting to make sure that they're able to also get,
Yeah.
Their plan
up their plan time, because even though they have a different type of work expectation,
Well,
they're, they need it too.
it's something that we need to talk about and make sure we're treating them appropriately.
Yeah.
I would say, in in a pinch situations, an instructional coach, while we are pulling them away from what we want them to be doing, right?
Right.
And that's a duty as assigned, and their plan would be whatever the plan of that teacher is that they're
Oh, I see. If they were
that
subbing the
they're
whole
filling
day.
in for, right? So, again, it's not what we want them to be doing, but they would be getting a plan.
I see. So if the person was asked to be the substitute for that staff member for the whole
Right.
day, they would get the plan time of that person. But if they were just covering a here and there,
That would be
I
a
think that's
duty as
kind of what-
assigned, and
right,
they get their own assigned plan time.
right, okay.
And all of those positions are on a teacher's contract with a
Yes.
stipend for their additional work, correct?
there's no stipend.
Counselors have a
extra,
stipend.
they have extra days, yes. Mhm.
Yes, counselors have an
Social-
extra day.
Social workers do not have a stipend,
Nope.
Not that I know of.
Nope,
and instructional coaches do not have a stipend.
They do
No.
not.
I just say that because I know in other districts, a lot of those positions aren't under a teacher's contract.
Right. Right. Okay.
Okay, so then again, I'm working backwards up. This issue of specialist caseload and FTE.
Yeah, and give some history there. So I heard you guys, we talked about this a little bit last year, and so I've been pressing Pam to educate me more because I truly didn't understand it either.
Okay.
And from what I understand, and Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, there is some inconsistency in what these folks are doing. So, like if it's a full, I'm going to use you as an example because I think you are an example. So, PE, you have a full PE teacher? Okay. And how many, you have
How many sections?
how many sections? 14. So that's an example, right? Where we have a full PE teacher with 14 sections, and there could be a full PE teacher somewhere else who has 27, right?
I would think wouldn't it be 24 or something?
24, you're right, 24, sorry. I knew it was 24 or 27. So Pam's working on that, on kind of getting that more in line this year. And so my suggestion would be that we have her come back and report. Now, I will say that if it's, again, Christy, as an example, we are using those specialists to do other things in the building. So intervention, yeah. So it's
Right.
not like they're just, they're doing highly appropriate things with our students throughout the day. So we're utilizing them, it's just utilizing them in a different way. So I am confident.
Yeah. How do you determine if somebody is going to be full-time in a building with like 14 sections and then do interventions?
Yep.
As opposed to being in a building with 14 sections and then going to another building to fill in for like 4 more sections?
That's the exact same question I asked. So it's a very good question. So
Okay.
I believe we're going to be much more in line this year or
Okay.
next year.
Okay.
But I think Pam would be able to give us a little better idea on that.
How do you determine if someone's going to be like a 0.8 or a 0.9 FTE?
Also a great
Also
question.
Pam question, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
also a great
This is
question.
great.
So
Look.
I don't think we've
Pam,
been,
where are you?
I honestly,
I'm
it's
I'm kidding.
it's a very valid question. I don't think we've been consistent
Okay.
in that application.
All right.
Okay, and then gen ed preps in different curriculum areas, right?
I think, Dr. Dan, can you speak on that a little bit as well? So you're talking about like nesting classes and,
So let's say you had Spanish
Languages are
1, 2, 3, and 5, and then you also taught Algebra 1.
Yeah, languages are
just thought of
tough
it.
because,
Yeah.
oftentimes you have one teacher specifically
Correct.
teaching one language. And so if you have a Latin teacher, they're teaching all levels of Latin. If you have a German teacher, they're teaching all levels of German. And so,
Right.
how did those different preps kind of figure in? And the tough thing is when you schedule your German 4 class for 4th hour, that doesn't work for all the students that need to take German 4, 4th hour. And so oftentimes you have to nest the German 4 class within a German 3 class and kind of fold it in there. Again, we try to balance that need as much as we can with the number of students in those classes. And oftentimes, if it's not Spanish, outside of Spanish, a lot of times those classes are lower in numbers.
Right. I think it's more concerned about having, being a language teacher, but then also having one class that's
Not language.
social studies
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a science class, or because you're certified. You are certified. But then it puts you into different departments and just the workload with that. So I don't know if this is more
Yeah, and if you.
discussion?
Yeah.
It seems
I
to be
think-
more
I
high
think-
school
I think there could be a way to more clearly define that. What does that
Okay.
look like for those preps and those scenarios? I know when we start making those decisions, we look at the total number of students that they have on their rosters.
Right.
And when you include those additional core content classes, those total numbers are 70, 80 students compared to a biology teacher that has 5 sections of 140 students.
Right.
It's quite a big difference.
and trying to think back about master schedule building. I know you want to avoid doing what Jill's saying of, having somebody teach in 2 different departments and having some nested classes, but there's going to be times in which you maybe make that decision because you want to keep this person as part of your staff rather than maybe putting them on reassignment because we can't fill out their entire schedule.
Correct, because a lot of times in those language areas, they would only be teaching 4 sections,
Right.
and they need a 5th section, so what are they going to teach for that 5th section?
Right.
And then you're whittling class sizes down to 4, 5, and 6 students at a time. And so we're just trying to balance that out.
Yeah.
So I like what you just said, Jill, and if we want to go there, I mean, to me, a very appropriate discussion, but if we're thinking language, I love the discussion of maybe having Dr. Higgins come in and talk about how he's guiding the secondary principals, and then Todd, adding on from his perspective.
Yeah, we don't want to get in a situation where we have to reduce a teacher to a 0.8. A few years ago, our Latin enrollment had dropped down. We reduced our Latin teacher to a 0.5, and that was very difficult, and we didn't want to do that. So trying to grow those programs at the same time.
You can't change can you change someone from a 1.0 to a 0.5 and
Nope.
not give them, okay, but you'd have to assign them something, right, to fill the
Yeah, we could reassign them to another building.
right?
But then that's, at a harm to, we're losing a teaching period in travel.
Right.
Oftentimes, it's not great for the teacher, frankly. They typically don't want to leave their original building, right?
Right, they like to stay in one building.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of nuances involved in those really niche situations.
It's enrollment driven.
It's enrollment driven,
100%,
it's the
yeah.
master schedule driven,
And I would say many of those .8s, .7s, .9s, many of those were upon teacher request in my history, to where a teacher was full-time, the numbers dropped in their class, and they came to me due to childcare or whatever the case may have been. We didn't want to lose that teacher, but they couldn't work full-time. So the majority of the points, in my experience, have been teacher request, or where we went to bat for the teacher to keep them on, and we're able to manipulate the master schedule to where we could keep that teacher employed, but yet meet their needs at a .7 or .8.
What about having them, they teach 5, right, and they happen to be in 2 different departments, looking at what they're assigned for their student support hour? So that because not all student support hours are the same amount of required support.
Yeah, I think we take that into consideration all the time. We certainly
Yeah.
do with our special education staff and when possible, and then also how do we navigate that seminar time period? Are they going to be a targeted interventionist during that time, or are they available to help their
That's
students'
true.
need? So,
Because I guess you don't have every single staff member in a building having a seminar, right? Not every
Correct.
single staff member has their own group of kids during seminar. So could that be looked at as well? If you were working in 2 different departments because you only had 4 classes to fill for your main assignment?
Right.
What it looks like for your student support hour or your seminar?
I'm processing.
and we try to look at the whole schedule. What does their day look like, right?
Sure.
What does their odd day look like compared to their even day? And we try to balance those things out.
Okay.
We also looking at the big picture. So, we have some of those other courses, study skills.
Oh, sure.
And some of those other pieces that we can put together. So where do those fall? Where do you have the extra FTE? Do you have an extra 0.1 in math? Do you have an extra 0.2 in science that you can drop a section for study skills? And maybe this year it works, but next year we're going to be real tight in science, and we've got to shift that study skills to an English class, an English teacher for 1 semester.
Right.
So it ebbs and flows, and
Okay.
just trying to balance that each year is a challenge.
And Dr. Dane, around Jill's proposed solutions or ideas, would you consider that if a teacher came to you and said, hey, I've got nested classes, I'm in 2 different departments, could I not have a seminar, or could I get a preferred prep or supervision time?
Yeah,
Would you-
absolutely. And we've even gone down that road over the years where, man, this is really tough this year. And so the next year, we're going to do whatever we can to kind of navigate away from that as much as, much as possible. So I think it's just how you communicate with some transparency on how we do that, and being genuine about what we need for kids and what we want to do to support the teachers.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I would like to think that all of our secondary principals would consider those situations and come to HR if they felt like they needed some guidance and, hey, do you think this is justifiable? Do you think we can back this, in all of our different schools? I wonder if a solution is to encourage our teachers to come to their leaders about those requests and say, hey, this is a lot. Could I get something taken off my plate by not having a seminar? Could I, whatever?
Right.
I don't know if it needs to be universal language or a.
It could be something that we put a commitment around, or something that you have in a, I don't know if you have it in a handbook, but kind of like what you have for when you're looking to have someone cover when you have low number of subs, you kind of had, something you give to guidance, you give to principal. Guidance is the word, yeah. So maybe
Like,
guidance
This
to
is
give.
the worst possible solution, this is the best possible solution.
Yeah, things that you can do to help a staff member if they're in a situation where they're teaching 5 different preps in 2 different departments. Anyway.
Yeah, ultimately, I think we want to grow our language programs and
Yeah.
and then achieve a balance, but we also have teachers that are teaching Spanish part of the day and then also teaching French part of the
Yeah.
day, so.
That's true.
And I think for the most part, they appreciate that change up, but then you look at their day and, boy, they do have 5 different preps, but they also wanted to do that. And
Yeah. But that's one department though, technically, right? Because it's the language department.
Right, so how do we?
Calculus is a different.
How do we count
geometry,
preps
so-
in language?
Yeah.
It may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like we count everything else, but because of the nesting, some of the other things, it's a little more complicated.
Right.
What if,
Not easier, but
yeah, what if Dr. Higgins and I put together some ideas to bring back to the team on this? I'm just kind of hesitant about painting us into a corner that we're going to have to do these things, because there could be some teachers, I'm not thinking of one of yours, it's like, no, I'm good, I want to build my program, right?
Right.
I don't want to have to do this, that, or the other.
Right. Okay.
I think that makes sense on that one. And then it looks like the rest of the bullets are all special education related.
Yes.
My guess is that Sherry's gonna come in and say, I agree. Like, these are all
That would be great.
things. And then we have to figure out what we can possibly do next year to improve some of these things. But I can ask her to look at these things. She might also reach out to you, Casey, if there's like direction or these notes she needs more clarification on. But I think it makes sense to sort of forward to her and have her come in with, hey, here's our planning, here's how we do caseloads, here's what I'm hearing. Have a discussion about it, and if there's recommendations for any of these things, we then can figure out where it makes sense for that discussion to go either IBB here, or it's something that's gonna have to go to the compensation discussion.
I'd like to see caseload numbers, like averages for this year and maybe previous years. But then also maybe highs and lows,
I was gonna say,
like
could it be
outliers,
projected?
and then projections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I know for the first one, I personally, like just for language around the 4 paperwork days, like
Okay.
just so that we can keep that, because it really is beneficial. And again, it's that ESSER fund, so it will eventually go away.
And then just the communication around it when, if you plan a paperwork day and then you write your sub-plans, but then when it comes to happen, there's more subs needed in the building than there are available subs. Typically, the sped teacher is then told, you can't take it today because we don't have enough subs. And you've already planned to take the day because you probably have paperwork that needs to get done.
Right.
So just communication ahead of time. I don't know how to fix that, but I mean, the way to fix it is just to let them take their paperwork day when they planned it.
Yep.
But I know that we've got sub issues too.
Okay, so it looks like we have homework assignments to various individuals coming out of this to review and look at. I think all the homework is to individuals who are administrators, so I would definitely encourage all those people to reach out though if there's, feedback, so that they're not just on one train track, but if they need to go back and say, well, what was the origination of this, or where is that, or is this a really big issue or a really small issue? And then they can come back and present. In terms of when, we probably could just do that at our next, how much time do we have before our next meeting?
It's the 18th.
It's the 18th. Yeah, we can probably do that by the 18th, don't you think? Dr. Schumacher, do you think that we could have these individuals come back and present by the 18th of April?
Well, the mega committee is supposed to present on the 18th
On the
as well.
18th as well.
We can be short and sweet. I'm just kidding. I say short and sweet, and you're like, it's gonna take
And
that.
that's
Well, the 18th is only a 3.
I was gonna say, that's a
Right.
short,
Okay.
that's a short meeting.
Well, so we might have to push this to then that first May meeting. Okay.
May 1?
Yep,
Okay.
first May meeting, and I'll take care of communicating to Sherry. Okay, okay. All right, looking at our chart, we've got 3 more left. I don't know what you're prepared to discuss, but I suspect that these could also involve some homework on all of these. I think it'd be nice if we can introduce and frame and focus.
Well, we had leave on the agenda anyway,
Yeah.
Yep.
so.
Does
Yes.
anyone need a short break, or do we want to go ahead and introduce and frame and focus the leave issue?
Power through.
Okay.
Okay. He's like, I'm going anyway.
Let me pull it up. Good. And then drag it, wait, hold on, let me come back over here.
You got this.
I'm gonna close this one first. My tiny little dot, right click. Come on, you got it. There you go. Okay, come back over. Thanks, Stacy.
I got you.
Makes me feel like I'm doing a good job.
You are.
Okay. Leave time. Okay. It's been a while since I've looked at the statement, but we have discussed kind of some frame and focusing. So the issue statement says, how can we address the need to provide temporary leave that meets personal and family needs? And some of our focus is particularly looking at the deduct rate, which currently is 1/187th of our salary, and looking at the cost of a substitute when we're absent being 175. Then just some information that 1/187th of our base salary is $243. So that's how much would get deducted from someone's paycheck if they ran out of leave days and, were still absent. Short-term disability, I know that's a benefit that you can sign up for. And just kind of looking at that, it allows for 6 weeks, I think it's 70%?
Up to.
Up to 70%, but then it's whatever days you have in your bank, you use those first, and then short-term disability would begin, and it would only go up to the 6-week mark. If I'm wrong on that, I would like to learn more about short-term disability. When you are going on a maternity leave or paternity leave, your 10 current temporary leave days are not all included in the amount of days you have when you're out. So let's say you go on maternity leave in October. Right now, those employees are given 2 or maybe 3 of their 10 current leave days. And then when they return, they get the other 7. But, somebody who's not going on maternity or paternity could take all 10 of their current temp leave in September. But someone on maternity or paternity would not have access to all 10 of their current leave right then. They would get like a prorated amount until they came back.
Do we know why it works like that?
I don't know that we have language necessarily. I think it's a past practice.
I believe it's in the language. I
It
believe
is?
it's
Okay, you have
it's
to
at
help
least the
me find it.
interpretation of the language.
Okay, got it.
That is correct. That's how we do it.
Okay. This is a solution, but looking at other districts and if they have a sick leave pool and what that looks like. We have staff exhausting their days because of COVID or flu or leave, and I know that a previous solution was an MOU that we had regarding being able to request days from the Board of Education Sick Leave Assistance Bank, and that process. Just looking at other possibilities. We put a couple different districts in there with their sick leave pool information. This one kind of came up, I think, when we were discussing late resignations as well. Someone who's within their first 3 years within the district doesn't have an option for like an extended personal leave. Oh, the kids are coming. Bye, kids. Have a good day.
If you wouldn't mind shutting that. Thank you, Linda.
Or even like a health extended leave. I think with the health leave extended, if you're within your first 3 years, it has to be approved by, or it can be approved by the superintendent or their designee, but it's not like a guaranteed thing you could use. If a staff member happens to have an injury caused by, a student having to use their own leave or having to be deducted pay because they're gone, and how that works with workers' comp and things like that.
Okay.
So, yeah. Maybe something similar to what we did last time with
Break it down.
organization.
Yeah, that's a lot of individual issues. And again, I'm trying to think about how we go about dividing that. Some of these are just direct solutions or asks.
Yeah.
And, we'll have to work through that. I get it that they're under the umbrella of sufficient temporary leave.
Right.
Or sufficient leave for issues. I'm just trying to think on this for a minute as how it makes sense to go about this.
I think we had an issue last year about staff when they exhausted their days and then, because of COVID-related illness and then, the issue was losing pay. And so we had an MOU about that. So kind of some of those are along those lines as well.
And this is because that leave bank that MOU is expiring at the end of this year? Mm-hmm.
But also, that MOU says that you have to have all your leave, well, I guess this would be the same thing, exhausted. I guess with a sick leave pool, you'd also have all your leave exhausted too. That would be a condition, right?
I think this really takes some time and study because there
Yeah.
are strong opinions that go both ways. Like, there are positive views of sick leave pools.
Right.
And then there are negative views of sick leave pools, that essentially that they allow for abuse. Again, I think maybe this is something that needs some time and some study about different scenarios. So somebody who gets sick multiple times a year, what is possible, what is feasible.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how Stephanie would guide us right now. Yeah, I just don't know how she would guide us right now. It's
hard because it's really, I mean, I think the difficulty here with the last issue in this one is it's multi-pronged. That's not to say the issues we raised haven't been multi-pronged, but it's really multi-pronged and sort of, again, I don't know how we fit, like some of these are, I mean, and it's okay, but some of these are just direct asks, right? Like deduct days, decrease the amount.
I don't think,
How do we?
I think we should table this until Stephanie's here
Sure,
to
sure,
guide us
absolutely.
through it.
And we agreed at the beginning of this too.
The May meeting, or where do we want to add this? Okay.
Well, I'm assuming April 18th, we would come back to late resignations if
Yeah.
Stephanie's with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I don't know if we'd be able to do this and late resignations and have our subcommittee, mega subcommittee.
No, this would have to go to the May one,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we only have one scheduled in May?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we've got, and I'm gonna throw this out there, and it's not really in my comfort zone, but
Yeah.
some of these things are more traditional bargaining type things, right? Where we're
Right.
getting into the territory of, we have this solution and we'd really like to see this.
They are, and you're right, we should have Stephanie kind of
And-
help frame and focus so I can do it in a way that's not solution.
And it's also our comfort level as to if we want to do that, right? Like, she said that there are facilitators that will say, okay, if you want to do the traditional thing, we can do the traditional thing, just know it might not end up in a solution. But if it's something where we take our top 2 priority issues and you take your top 2 priority issues and you're like, hey, I think we could sell this if we got this. I would not be opposed to, with a facilitator so that we don't get back into pure traditional for everything, doing something like that. If we do get there and she facilitates that, I think both sides need to take time to think about what are those top priority things? What are the things that might be a give and get? But she may take us there because of the way that these have been couched. These are things we'd like to see. This is what we're moving toward. So I don't know, that's just one idea I have based on the comment that she made during the last meeting, that sometimes people want to do that. And if you want to do that and that leads to a solution, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Obviously what you don't want to do, and the goal of IBB is to get away from the reasoning behind it, right? Because the reasoning is what leads to mutual understanding and poor assumptions not being made, right? So we want X just because we're greedy and terrible, right? You should be having the discussion behind that to explain why and what the goal is, and I assume that's how she would facilitate that. But we have a lot of pending issues on the table, and we have things that, again, we might say, hey, we got this year, and we gave this. So I'd be open to that if that's a way, if something that she can facilitate. I think we'd want to give her a heads up so she can prepare that we might be willing to go there.
I would be interested in talking with her, as a group, to help really focus in on how to phrase the issue statement, how to discuss interests, and to put it into the way, yes.
Like to put it
Yes,
in IBB
and,
style?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I get where you guys are at and trying to, and listening to all of your members and all the feedback that you're getting, right? And I think we can have the discussions around all of these solutions, but they need to be, again, circled back to what are
The main,
Right,
yeah.
right. I'm just going to be super candid, and I'm getting comfortable here too. So it appears as though we had about 20, 30 different things that just got folded into 2 issue statements that you guys got feedback from, which is fine, but it's not, I think, how we've been trained in IBB.
Right.
And I know it's challenging. I mean, the challenge that you face is your numbers, right? So we've got just a more focused entity essentially that we're representing. And so I know you guys face that challenge. I know it's important for you guys to let your membership know that you've listened and you've heard and you don't ignore any issues.
Right, and I can see the one before this with the lots of different topics. I know Stephanie talks about symptoms of bigger problems, and so maybe a lot of these are symptoms, but that doesn't mean that they're not important, but a root cause could be,
Like up the chain
Yeah.
could lead to things
could be
happening
staffing,
down.
could be, who knows? So I think they're all workload issues. It's just the workload encompasses a lot of things because we have so many different
Yeah.
types of workers.
Yep.
But yeah.
I get that, and some of these, and I know we've done this before, and we've done this with SPED. It may also behoove us as we think about this to say which things are P&A issues and which things are working committees that meet throughout the school year, right? To continuously try and improve and address. Some of the issues may be things like that. Some of them may be pure P&A. And certainly maybe she'll guide us on this one we're on now of start listing these as solutions, right? Like all these things you have here. So it's, these are the pressure points on leave and these are all solutions and we can, go back up into the process and then flesh out interests.
For the remainder of today,
And if you're
I
not
don't know
ready,
that
I'm
I've
not
really
gonna.
thought through, I mean, I've thought through NEA-SM number 5, but I don't know. Personally, I would want to gather my thoughts more.
Yeah. If there's, I would say on these
I mean, you
two.
still have one more SMSD number 6, too.
What is that one?
A retirement thing.
So that one, I think we can quickly get through during our compensation discussion.
Compensation, okay.
So that one should be
Cool.
okay. I know 5 and 7 are issues that I'm positive you hear from your members from, because we hear from them too. If there is data or individuals that you need, or thoughts you need us to think about, or anything to be prepared and ready to discuss those things. And you don't have to think of them now, certainly you could reach out in between.
Yeah.
Because it
Maybe mark
seems like
this-
5 could go with one of your sub-issues in number 8, right?
Possibly.
And is the cell phone policy one that you see as more of a discussion topic? Or
I
is
don't
it-
know how we would have language about something that deals with us, with students and cell phones, you know what I mean?
Right.
Without
I mean-
actually introducing it. I mean, if you want me, if we can introduce it and start with it as a discussion.
I think it would be helpful to know on that one what the frame and focus is.
Yeah.
So that we can start thinking about, what we could possibly do there. So, I mean, and I don't, if it's something where you want to take time and prepare, I'm just thinking, I know that I benefit from having time to think. I wish I did, and I wish I never thought about work outside of work. But I'll literally wake up in the morning and be like, I think I have an idea on that one, or I know a resource I can go to on that one. So it's nice if we can get things introduced early just to give us the time to have that full thought process and the creative process. So I think if we can just frame and focus that one, it might help us in, thinking about how to come up with a solution.
Yeah, I can definitely share some.
Okay.
If we want, I could tee up R6 just so they could have some time to think
Yeah.
about what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah,
And-
sure.
Just as a use of our time.
Okay, so
Okay, so we're gonna
you
go ahead and-
first, and then we'll do SMSD number 6 first, and then we can do NEA-SM 7.
Perfect.
Okay, should I pull it up here?
Yep.
Yes, please.
Screen mirroring. Okay, so we titled it Teachers Saving for Retirement. I need to make that larger. So in my world and in the benefits committee world too, we've been consistently concerned about the number of our staff members, certified staff members who are contributing to a 403 plan and planning for retirement, especially considering the fact that our newer teachers who are on the third tier of CAPERS, it's not as robust as those that are on previous tiers. So that's been a concern of ours. We were, of course, always concerned about recruiting and retention of our staff and making Shawnee Mission one of the best places to work and stay working. We've also gone down the road, and I think most of you know this, about possibly recommending a single vendor for our retirement plan to the Benefits Committee and then to the Board of Education. So with all of that, one of the brainstorms was, and this would, why it's compensation, we brainstormed an idea of the district potentially contributing to certified employees' 403 plans. So we do something similar, just in full disclosure for our administrators, as an incentive, as a bonus. And so I guess this is a solution, but the idea would be to do something similar, a certain dollar amount that would go to all certified employees where they would have to open up an account, a 403B account. The district would contribute that amount to that employee annually. For administrators, it happens in October. I would assume it would be something like that. The idea, or my thinking, or our thinking would be, it would, to those certified employees, they'd already have an account open. It would, encourage them to, okay, might as well contribute another $10, $15, $20, and so they start to plan for their retirement as well. That would, of course, come out of the bucket, and so it would come out of the overall bucket that would go towards compensation. So that's basically it. The interests are there. That's it.
Do you know what percentage of teachers we have, or, professional employees we have that have a 403B?
Yeah, I think we had a total of 500 accounts and between our 403B and 457 for everyone. So something to consider is that we have 120, 125 administrators. They automatically get one because the district contributes. So that would mean that there's another 350, 375 accounts. And so that could be doubled up, like one person could have multiple accounts. That's across all of our employee groups.
So is that admin interns as well get this?
What's that?
Admin interns also get this, or just admin?
Admin interns don't get this.
You mean they don't get the thing that you're doing for admin?
Right.
Okay.
Dr. Schumacher, have you guys identified a vendor?
We haven't. Yeah, we'll go through the RFP process and then to the benefits committee and so on.
Yeah, because I think that we talked about the benefits committee hearing about the what do you call it?
RFP.
RFP.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't sure if the last time we met as a benefits committee, talking about looking at all four of the vendors, or are there more that are going to be looked at than just four?
I don't know yet. Yeah,
Okay.
we haven't heard back from CBIZ yet.
Okay.
And just so everyone knows too, and I guess to our community, the more assets the organization contributes towards a vendor, the better rates individuals would get as far as service charges, things like that. And so it would be a benefit to the entire group if there was more assets going into the investments.
Do we have a percentage or a dollar amount? Or just-
Like a recommendation?
Yes.
I mean, I have something in my head, but I mean, I think it again, it all comes out of the bucket, so that's why it's compensation.
We can talk about it during the compensation
Right.
time. Yeah.
So that would just be literally a multiplier by our number of professional employees.
Number of people, right.
Okay.
I mean, selfishly, I think it's awesome for us out on the recruiting trail and that we be able to sell that to our potential hires, and I think it's a great benefit to current employees planning for the future.
An additional solution to get more people involved is to let them know that it's an option. I know that I'm sure it's something that you talk about when you offer benefits and have that discussion with new hires, but we don't have a benefits fair. Like in the past, I think, when I was, many years ago, when I was hired, you could go around all the different places, all the different vendors, and find out about the benefits that you could sign up for. So,
Yeah.
that has to be.
We also think that only having one vendor, the research says only having one vendor helps as well, rather than people being confused by, do I pick this one, do I pick that one? Well, just never mind, I'm not going to do anything. At least that's what they tell us. So.
Now, when you leave the district, do you get to take these funds with you?
Yep.
It is not a pension, it is your money.
Stays with you.
No, you can't withdraw it without penalties until you hit retirement age, I think.
Yes.
I don't think there's any exceptions maybe there is some minor exceptions, but in general, it's.
Yeah, there's
money.
massive penalties to take it out prior to your retirement. But yeah, it's yours. It's your money.
But I also think that there are a lot of us, like I myself, I do contribute to this fund, but I also have a separate account that I also give to outside of the district. So I think it's, in my opinion, people probably are doing this just because they're not doing it through the district doesn't mean that they're not planning for their future. So in my opinion, I do give to this, but I would like to have the bucket for other things that I could use to contribute to maybe a product that might have a higher growing value than being the 403B in District 1, in my opinion.
The benefit of doing it through your employer is it
Pre-tax.
reduces your taxable income. So there is that one benefit as opposed to your own independent investments that you do. But yeah, you absolutely have other options for saving for retirement, and people do take advantage of those.
I like this because it simplifies the process for new employees. As a dad whose daughter is a teacher in the district, she needs an opportunity to simplify her investment portfolio as a 23-year-old teacher.
Yeah, so the thinking would be when we're doing onboarding, okay, the district's going to contribute X amount of money towards your 403, you need to set up an account, and while you're doing that, you should also consider adding an additional whatever out of your check. So.
It'd be their option. I do think it's sometimes we get to where, and this would not necessarily be a super small number, but sometimes we're getting to where we talk about compensation and we're like, well, if we maximize, we're at this really weird 4 decimal point number, we should see I think it's something worthwhile for the various committees that take the pie to look at and say, well, we could still get X percentage and we could do this benefit, or we cannot do this benefit. I think it's worthwhile potentially having the teams consider whether to include or not to include something like that in their plan.
And will our benefits committee be meeting to talk about going from, whether or not we will be going from 4 providers to 1?
Yes.
Looking at, okay, all of the, okay. So you're waiting to hear back from CBIZ? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I have a meeting this week, and then, we would hope to set up a benefits committee meeting by the end of the month.
Okay. That's good.
Awesome. Okay, so that's the frame and focus on that. And then the cell phone issue.
I can go on there. Uh-oh. Do you want me to open it? You're still on.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I started multitasking.
You're fine.
You guys caught me.
It's okay. Okay. So, help me remind ourselves, we had this highlighted as a repair, but do we have does that mean a repair currently in practice or repair with our language? What is,
The only language we have in the P&A about recording, I can
oh, that's probably why it's there.
pull it up.
That's why it's there. Thank you for doing that, yes.
Yeah, there is language about recording. I think it is super outdated.
It's very
and
outdated, yes.
It would, I mean, with the way technology advances, it's like you'd have to update this every single month practically. I feel like sometimes, like it's monitoring and recording is Article V, Section M. And it says recorders with the prior knowledge and permission of the professional employee. An exception is if the device is required by a student's IEP or 504 plans, recordings will not be used for evaluative purposes.
So, I mean, truthfully, this would keep a student from recording a teacher with their cell phone. Anyway, let me go back. Let's not get ahead of myself.
Well, it's odd because we've considered it and there's no connection to the student discipline code, right?
No, yeah. There's not a
So-
connection to the student discipline code, so how
So it
would you make
says
sure they
that
didn't do
in the
it?
P&A.
Yeah.
There's no connection in the student discipline code. And it is a problem that every single school district, every single school employee deals with, and it's a very current issue. I cannot think of a week that has gone by since I've worked in the school district where some person in a various role said they were recorded and wish they weren't. Or they were uncomfortable by it, or it was used as an intimidation tactic. And I don't know what we do with that.
And I guess technically by Kansas law, you can record a conversation that you're having with someone as long as the one person knows.
So there's no illegality, right? So you couldn't go to the police, right? There's nothing under Kansas law that says, I'm gonna go to the police. I mean, I can tell you that from my view, we have concerns from administrators where students are recording as a means of bullying, right? So now I have this and I'm gonna show this.
Right.
We deal with it all the time from just a student-on-student problem, right? All the time it creates issues, passing around in those videos. I'd be interested to hear, like, I mean, I think I know, but I would be interested to hear where the teacher,
Yeah.
Where this comes up for teachers.
For one, it's a big drain on instructional time because you have to tell the student to put it away, turn it off, put it in your backpack, and then get refocused. I think it's dealt with differently at every school. And so, not that we're going to be able to streamline every school deals with the same way, but just there's frustration on, is there an actual plan to help alleviate the issue, and is there follow-through? So.
And what do you mean when you say an actual plan?
Good question. Something in writing that's been sent to parents from the principal and the staff so that we all know, okay, you have your phone out right now, you need to put it away. And so because I've had to tell you to put it away, I'm going to email your parent and let them know that I had to do that once. I see it again, now I need you to stay after or do a lunch detention. Oh, I see it a third time, okay, now this is going to be a write-up or something. So, something that's, I guess, actionable or so that you're not just, I'm not saying it 20 times to the same kid within an hour's time, and they have no consequence. And not that I don't think we would have language about consequences. I'm just sharing the frustration. And this year I'm at a middle school, so that's, where I'm dealing with it. And we recently did have a principal that's joining us for fourth quarter and put together a more concrete plan. And I don't know, John can speak to it, but I've already seen a difference just because we had exactly this is what you do and this is what, like, step by step. It was communicated with parents like 3 times in a row within a week's time just to make sure, communicated with staff and.
Yeah, no, it's definitely decreased since we put this plan in place. Is there still the issue? Yes. and it's the constant reminder, put your phone away, turn your ringer off, quit looking at your watch. If you really add it up, that's a lot of instruction time that's taken away when it's just you don't need it here. You're here to learn,
Who makes that who makes that decision about what level of cell phone usage is or is not allowed in class? Is that like the principal's like, this is the rule in our school? Is that like every teacher has a different standard?
I would say teachers really have the autonomy to kind of navigate what they need, whereas
Currently, yeah.
I think every science teacher, every science classroom in our building, they use their cell phones every day to record labs and navigate that tool as a learning option for them. But we also have protocols and practices where we have shoe organizers and other things where students walk into the classroom and they put in the shoe organizer, and that's the protocol for that class. And so we try to support our teachers in all of that. And cell phones, again, are a tool, and I might argue that it's probably easier for a student to record a teacher using a MacBook than it is to record a teacher using a cell phone. And they can just turn the camera around. So I think it's a tool, and it's a distraction like everything else. And the one thing that we remind all of our teachers of is that 90-minute class period, students are going to be engaged. Guaranteed, they're going to be engaged. The key is to make sure that they're engaged with the learning and not the distractions. So what can we do in that class period to help them engage in the learning? And
So Dr. Dane, if I'm one of your teachers and I said, Dr. Dane, I'm going to require my kids to put all of their cell phones in a caddy before they walk in the door, you would support me in that?
yeah, 100%. In fact, I would say 90% of our teachers probably do.
At South? Okay. Are there things
We
in
bought a lot of
place-
shoe organizers.
Yeah. Do you know if you've had to have any kind of discipline issue because of?
Someone took the wrong phone or,
We really haven't had any cell phone issues that we've dealt with in the last 5 or 6 years. Now, we're constantly dealing with social media, but a lot of that happens on the weekends or over the evening or 2 a.m. or whatever else that we're getting screenshots that we're navigating with those. So
I think I would like to see like principals from different buildings sharing how, maybe it's more middle school because they are unregulated. No. I don't want to say this.
speaking as a high school teacher, I would love to see how that works because it's an issue. It's an issue.
How like to put their cell phones in a shoe caddy?
How to
at the
get them off them.
How to get them off of them.
How to get them off them. Without constant, we make the phone calls, we do the things, the things that we're supposed to be doing, and it's 100% still an issue.
Yeah.
As a primary teacher, just to throw it out there, I don't see much in my kindergarten classroom. However, that being said, 5th and 6th grade teachers, I think, is a different world in elementary. So I think, I don't know how much you know about it either, but I think there'd be an interest of having elementary feedback from principals as well.
We do a lot of the same in our student handbook, because when I came to Rushton had a separate one from the district. We do talk about cell phones off and in their backpack, but we don't go searching kids to see if they're often in their backpack. Typically, our teachers have parking lots for their kids to put cell phones or a valuables basket where they can put their cell phones if they have them. But I haven't had a lot of issues with that.
No. And just with the recording too at the elementary level, primary, again, I've had students record me on their iPads in my class, but they had no idea what they were doing. So it was completely innocent on their end. But that did make me reflect about how easy it would be for a student to record.
If there's recording at the high school level, it's absolutely usually with the phones as opposed to their computers.
Okay.
They FaceTime a lot on their computers, but recordings would occur probably over social media with their phones.
And I do know too, there is, this might not be relevant or not, but there's an app out there called Be Real. I don't know if
Yes.
you've heard it, and it's literally asking people to take a moment in time, and it asks you to take a picture of what's going on. And I could see a lot of privacy with that certain app on a phone too, where a student, I think it takes both sides of the camera. I don't know too much about it. I do not have it. But there's a privacy issue to me there too, of taking those pictures, if that Be Real comes through during school hours.
Well, and I would be all for using like a words parking lot or a shoe organizer, as long as somewhere it would mention that like I'm not responsible if said phone walks away or ends up with the wrong person, because I've been told in years past specifically not to do things like that in case that were to occur, because I would then be liable.
I think the key is if the student voluntarily puts their cell phone in the shoe caddy, they are putting it there. The teacher's not taking it.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we would be interested in.
I would still be
I
concerned.
cannot imagine a
realities.
scenario in which a teacher would be liable because a cell phone was lost or another student took it.
Okay, well.
That is why you should have
there has-
insurance on your cell phone.
There has been a case where a teacher took a student's cell phone because they were using it, this was a few years ago, left it on their desk, it was stolen, and then that teacher was held liable and had to pay for the phone.
Through the school district
and
or through like a
I think
criminal complaint?
It must have been a criminal complaint.
Okay, I'm not sure what mechanism the district would have.
No, I don't think the district, what I'm
Okay.
saying is the parent of the student who lost their phone.
But that's my only hesitancy in doing things like that, because absolutely, yes, please put this up over here so you're not distracted, and then we can move on about our day. You can go
Yep.
get it when it's available. But again, I don't want to be held liable in case it doesn't end up back with the appropriate student.
Right.
So,
So maybe more of, like you have there, what's each school building doing? Can we have, maybe at the middle school level, ideas shared from building to building? So that we can do something similar. If it's working in one building, we want to know, so we can do it in ours. Or if it's maybe not working, it's not going to be perfect.
Scott, Christy, and Chris?
And for, at least for secondary, there's a head principal, one head principal in each of those buildings. Can they discuss it as well?
Dr. Dane, what happens if a kid in my class refuses to turn it in?
Then we obviously navigate that conversation with the student and the parent and follow up on,
I could work with administration on that.
absolutely, follow up on discipline with
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Haven't really had a scenario like that. The other thing is that, for what it's worth, we have pretty robust camera system in the district, I think, but there are always those corners and those hallways or entrances and of course bathrooms where we do not have cameras. And whenever we're dealing with a student behavior issue, we never worry about finding it on camera because we get it on a cell phone video.
yep.
And we're using cell phone videos all the time to kind of
Discipline.
navigate those disciplinary scenarios for those students. So I never worry about finding it on camera because I'll have it on a student's cell phone before I find it on camera.
It's a weird
So
society.
it's been helpful. It's been helpful to have those recordings.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there should be any scenario where a student is recording a teacher for intimidation tactics, to shift the power differential, or certainly not for discrimination, harassment, or bullying, right? That should never happen. And I definitely think a teacher should be able to issue a directive that you are not to be using your camera, you are not to record me, I do not want to be recorded. And that a failure to follow those directives would be subject to
Insubordination.
discipline for insubordination. Of course, a lot of recording happens surreptitiously, right? And that's really frustrating. But of course, if it was something that rose to the level of For example, I'm recording you underneath your clothing, underneath your skirt or something that was discriminatory, I'm targeting you, or is it still of a bullying, we of course would process those.
So the staff member could fill out the form for that?
They had a student that was repeatedly trying to get to them with this, and like laughing, making fun of them, that sort of thing, and regular classroom management wasn't working, the kid was still doing it, that could potentially be disciplinary for, rising to the level of bullying. I certainly hope nothing like that is happening, but I do think that there's potential where those come into play because I see them come into play in student-on-student conduct.
Got it. Okay.
Where recording is being used for that purpose. So I think that's where the discipline code comes into play. But if we have a good example, at the middle school level, and there's things we can do, because I will tell you, I've had a principal ask me for resources on this. And one of the challenges is all of my teachers have different rules. Okay, well, if that's the world we're in, like some of them want them to have their phones, some of them don't ever want them to think about their phone during class. So how do I navigate that? And I think, yeah, it probably makes sense to, hey, here's best practices and here's the best ways that we figured it out. And just affirmation that you will have administrative support if you're dealing with an issue where a student will not follow the rule for your classroom. And when I taught at JCCC, I really wish I used a phone caddy because I don't know who I was talking to. It was not those students. They were just looking at their phone. I was earning my paycheck. I don't know. So I know that frustration. There's like an addiction to constantly checking it. So.
If a building decides that one solution is that when they have it out, if you've had to tell them more than once, then you tell the student they need to bring their phone to the office. If they're doing that willingly, the student is bringing their phone to the office and not someone taking it from them, is that something that the district has allowed? Or what I mean is, I know that there are some middle schools that do that and it's working for them, and like, is that frowned upon? Is that?
I mean, I guess the question I assume would be is how often is that happening? Like, are you gonna have a coup where there's like 500 students in the principal's office? We want our phones. I don't know.
Right.
I guess I go back to kind of how we approach that rapport in the classroom, and one thing that we echo over and over again, if you get into a power struggle with a teenager, we're going to lose every time. And so we try to avoid power struggles and build a positive rapport from the beginning and navigate those classroom norms and the expectation. And a lot of our students use that phone as an incentive. Okay, if you guys get this done in 15 minutes, then you're going to have some time with your phones. And your phones are in the caddy right now, and I need you guys to work hard for 15 minutes, and then that 15 minutes is over, you guys get 10 minutes of phone time, or 5 minutes of phone time, or whatever it may be in a 90-minute block. So, but it starts with that positive rapport, and our teachers know that if you get in a power struggle with a teenager, you're going to lose every time. And we kind of navigate that from the administrative standpoint as well, and have those real conversations with students about why, how, and what we can do to really improve the opportunity to learn. And usually moms and dads are on board with that as well.
Right. Yeah, from the staff that I've heard from, and even parents, they just want to feel as though they have a way to make sure it's, that there's follow-through, I guess. That like, if I've had to tell them 3 times in one class period, what's going to help that not happen again? So, like you said, a plan in place. Is this addressed at all in the student handbooks or the building, I don't know what you want to call it, handbook? So I think that's our question.
I think with Christy, Chris, and Scott, they could provide some pretty real feedback, maybe even Dr. Stubblefield, and that he oversees all of them. I know Dr. Hubbard met with her student advisory group, and cell phones was the topic. So I know
that's
she got
good.
some really, I had to leave that meeting prematurely, but she
Yeah.
got some good feedback.
I was at that meeting, and the students basically said that it's an integral part of their day, many times for learning instruction, other times, they said it comes down to the teacher. If some teachers don't have control over their classroom, and the kids just sit there and use it all day long, others have them put it in a shoe caddy, others have them put it away until the last 5 minutes. So, I mean, I think you could go upon scenario after scenario, but I think we do need to get Chris, Christie, and Scott in to find out what the principal's process is, what communication do they have with their staff at staff meetings, during professional development or whatever, dealing with classroom management, student distraction, cell phones, and everything else. So it's going to be all over the board is my guess. And if you probably walk down any high school hall or middle school hall, it's still all over the board. And I'm sure people get frustrated when they ask kids to put it away and they don't put it away.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Remember, one kid said, if I didn't have my phone, I wouldn't be at this meeting with you, to Dr. Hubbard, you know.
Because he uses it as a calendar?
So, and it was actually, well, do you use your cell phone during the day? And we're all like, yeah.
Right.
Well, why can't I? You know, why can't I be trusted to do it?
I will say this, I think we made a concerted effort to kind of work with our freshman horizontal team of teachers to have a different layer of expectation and structures in place for our ninth graders.
Yeah.
Than we do for our upperclassmen. Ninth graders seem to struggle with executive functioning skills.
Yes. No.
And so we try to force feed some of those structures in around how we do daily protocols with our ninth grade classes, which is different than some of the upperclassmen. So.
And I would think 7th and 8th grade is similar, very similar to the freshmen, because I don't see them using, I mean, maybe they use it as a calendar, but when they're on it, I don't ever see them on the
It's
calendar
never
app.
productive.
And you're right, it's different for when you get up into the upper grades, because they're becoming more responsible, they're becoming adults, they're learning how to use it in a productive way and a responsible way.
They need to.
Right,
It's something they need to learn because obviously we're going to have them.
right, they're not going away.
But at the same time, like, just how we get them off social media as opposed to actually, as opposed to actually utilizing.
Or
it as a
lessen it.
tool. Yeah, one of the two.
Okay.
I think at this point it'd be good just to outline our agendas. I just make sure I'm organized for the next two meetings.
Well, and if we decide we would need to, I mean, add a day.
Well, we do need to add a day in May, no matter what. But yes, certainly we can look at, so we have,
Day in May that we have, because I don't have anything on.
oh, we
Ninth.
don't?
The ninth.
The 9th.
Do I not have you on there?
The
Yeah,
9th,
all I have is May 9th.
12:15 to 5.
Oh, I also have something on May 17th.
Oh, maybe we did schedule.
Do we have, I have
8
one on,
8
Hold
to
on, I
11 on the 17th.
yeah, I have that on my calendar.
So we do have two meetings in
Yes,
May.
correct.
Which is also graduation.
May 17th.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
You don't?
8 to 11.
Let me forward it to you.
Have our 18th.
I don't know, there must be, probably, no, I don't think so. It's right during graduation, I mean, I don't think we'd have it.
Yeah, I don't have the May 9th. What's the May 9th one?
The May 9th is.
12:15 to 5.
Okay. Did you get those that I just sent? Hopefully. Do you not have them either?
I got it.
Okay. So let's just start outlining for the meetings that we have. So, okay, can someone tell me what meetings we have coming up? We have April 18th, and that's an afternoon,
Yeah, it's
Correct,
only 3 to
yeah.
5.
3 to 5. Okay, and then we have May what?
9th.
And what's that?
12:15 to 5.
12:15 to 5. And then May,
17th.
And that's 8 to 11.
Yep.
okay, so 2 more sort of half-days and 1 afternoon. Okay, so on April 18th, that is when we are scheduled to have the calendar subcommittee present. And then potentially late resignation. Okay. And then May 9th is when we put the association issues of staffing and caseload and leave in the compensation presentation.
Where are you typing this at? I'm just curious.
Where am I checking? Where am I
Typing it at.
Typing it just on my own computer.
Oh, okay, no problem. I wanted, yeah.
In my joint statement.
I wanted to make sure I was
draft that
following along.
prepared because
Yeah.
I always put an agenda at the end of the joint statement.
Right, perfect. I just wanted to follow along, make sure I was getting it all.
Hang on, I can share my screen. Let me
Okay,
close
let
my,
me get off.
just
of
so we're all,
Yeah.
it's a bunch of gibberish that I've just typed notes and do a joint statement so I don't forget later, but. 2753. Okay. Okay, so what, and this would typically be, okay, what are we missing from looking at our schedule that we still need to put on agendas?
NEA SM number, is it 5?
Yeah, 5, that's physically aggressive student.
Okay, so where do we want to put that? This is a long meeting. We should probably put it here. We might not get to it, but at least we can continue to flesh them out. Usually a compensation presentation takes like 45 minutes. I mean, for us, it's like 6 slides.
Yeah, and then time for questions.
Yes. How,
Do we, never mind. We actually had one thing that we came to a tentative agreement on today.
yes.
Okay, I was trying to make sure we covered all of them.
Do we have anything else looking at our chart?
Well, are we asking the directors to speak to us about cell phones?
Yes.
Or about what could be
Yes.
happening in different buildings? I mean, that could also be
Yeah,
on the 17th or another day.
I think we should, well, I'm seeing these things as all like presentations and response and data and information on issues that you guys have raised, but I also don't want to squish things in too much. So do we want to look at trying to add?
In the past, there have been times when we met closer to the end of May, like on the days where students have been released.
Right.
And we're
So
not teaching.
our last day is,
Come on, you gotta know
the
this.
23rd.
23rd for kids. 24th is a teacher work day. Typically, it's when you get your room ready, have your bio screening.
so we could look at the 24th, 25th. I'm leaving on the 26th.
Okay. The 25th, it would need to be at like 2 o'clock. Our executive board has something in the morning till about 2, but Thursday, the 25th. Wednesday, the 24th is a teacher work day, but we'd have to just talk about timing on that. I want to make sure that everybody can get what they need done to wrap up the end of the year. And
I would personally be okay. I have never not had my classroom packed up and ready to go by the end of that half day. I'm good.
Okay, so I can put a hold on these 2 days and ask people to hold their calendars.
Or even, afternoons, like once school is out on the 22nd or 23rd, I don't know.
Yeah?
But
22nd and 23rd would probably work better than
Then the last.
24th, 25th.
okay.
23rd's a half day.
Meeting on the 22nd.
Okay.
The 23rd's a half day, so that's early dismissal. That might be a possibility.
The 23rd is a half day, you mean?
Yeah. Last day for kids.
That's true.
Okay, we can put some hold in. I can send some holds for those. Now, I don't know if Stephanie's going to be available or not, but I can include her. Okay, looking at this schedule, I'm curious if you guys have a forecast as to whether, like, how concrete of a possible solution the calendar subcommittee is going to have, and also how digestible it may be, meaning, we have had advisory recommendations that require a whole, a deconstruction and a full discussion here. We've had others that are like no-brainer, this kind of work has been done, and so we're ready to go.
I will say that that subcommittee has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us on it. We've had 3 meetings. This will be our 4th when we have one next week. And we have deconstructed, reconstructed, deconstructed again. I think that I'm confident we'll be bringing recommendation, whether it's 1 or 2, or I don't know, but it will have been thoroughly discussed. And like I said, was it 6 of us from this group that are on that?
Okay.
Which I think was different than previously, but, so that can help with getting to a solution when you have people from the IBB team on the committee.
Okay, sorry.
There are lots of parts to it, and we're trying to put it together in a presentation, put together a presentation so it's organized nicely and can be discussed well.
I agree. I'm confident we're going to have a really good product for this team, the
Okay.
rest of the team to look at.
Okay. And again, so just to explain that document I sent to everybody on late resignation, I started and I worked up something and I was like, this looks like I'm presenting identified solutions. And so instead I went backwards and I was like, really the way school districts do this is summer and school year, and then here's the ways you can do it. I want to take away some potential bias, I guess that's the way to put it, out of it, because I color coded it because it's pretty to do that way and because it's the general view of the restrictiveness. But just know, for example, if you had a liquidated damages and made it $20,000, well, that would put it right up into the red zone, right? So obviously how you structure them could make them more or less restrictive. So that's just kind of the general view of how restrictive they are, but obviously it depends a lot what the actual terms are. I didn't build in terms, I just put in X's and blanks, and these are the ways you can do things. So hopefully that at least gives us a tool to be more organized about the way we talk about solutions and to not leave any holes in a potential solution. So then if we look at May 9th, that's a full half day, and then that'll be a lot of presentations and response on these issues. I do think, obviously we cannot negotiate outside of this setting. If there are things in those more lengthy issue statements that are priority issues or things that we need to have some calculations or data run on, let us know in the meantime so we can give directions to those administrators, or feel free, I'm going to identify them in this joint statement. So feel free to reach out to them directly and say, hey, on this one, these are the real pressure points. This might be building specific for right now. This, I think that might help with, I don't want to leave anything. It's a balance between making sure no one feels unheard or like their issue was left on the table, but also we have to, at some point, have some level of efficiency. And then Russ will be ready to present on compensation. We have an afternoon on May 17th. I would think what we could do there is that we could have this be like possible additional time for pending issues. Compensation committees present if time. Does that make sense? Because then if we typically do comp last, so if we need to push that, then we have these possible additional days. Does that make sense? Okay. Also, I think on some of these issues here that have multi-prongs, I don't know if any of those make sense for like a group or committee to look at, but there's not a lot of time for something like that to meet. So hopefully just those people looking at it can look at the detail in the issue statement and be responsive to all of it. Okay, I don't know.
When you share that with the people that we identified on the staffing and caseload, if they have questions, they can
Okay.
they're more than welcome to ask them of me, and I can, talk with people on this team as well. Like, if they're like,
Okay.
what does this mean?
Yep. I don't have that one up now, but yes, I'll let them know as well.
But yeah, I'll look into possible data if we think we need some on different things. But I think we did already talk about data on caseloads. Average caseload, high and low, outliers from previous years, and then projections going forward. Yeah.
Do we want to try to add another date before those? I mean, because if we can come to a conclusion, we would be able to get a vote out before summer.
Sorry,
So you mean-
I was in La La Land.
Maybe a date between now and April 18th, or a date
Or
between April
between April
18th
18th
and May 9th?
and May 9th.
Yeah.
I mean, because if we were able to come to agreement on things,
No, I mean,
We
we've
could
always
vote
held that as an
before we
ideal.
leave for
We've never
summer.
achieved it, but I've always liked the idea of setting up for that. I think we probably need to be prepared for Stephanie not to have availability if we add. And again, we can think about what our comfort level is in discussing without a facilitator and getting away from our MOU. But I would certainly be willing, to look at another, because that's a couple weeks in there. Let's see. I'm gonna log off so I can look at my calendar without. Thank you. See, I'm the dinosaur of the dinosaurs. Okay. Okay, so we are looking between those two dates. Okay, so that's essentially the last week of April and the first week of May.
Yes.
Okay.
Wednesday, the 26th?
That's a good day? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
Wednesday, the 26th.
Typically, my
Yeah.
week fills up like
Is
during
that
the
like
week.
a half day? I mean,
That's just how it works.
I'm with the superintendent for advisory. Me and Michael both, I didn't know if that was a possible afternoon or a morning.
I would look at probably adding another afternoon.
The meeting's at 4, maybe like a 1 to 3:30, something like that, 1 to 3:45.
Can you guys do that? 1 to 3:45?
I mean, I shouldn't say just, I always use the word just, but you're in the classroom, so you would
I mean,
put in for a sub.
I'd have to put in for a sub, and then I'd have to put in for a sub starting at 11:30. But that
Half
would,
day?
Right, because they have to do a half day.
I would have to do a half day on that. Unless my principal put a range coverage.
Well, we can use that, especially for people that are going to come back and share things with us regarding the issues that we talked about.
Yep, because there's plenty of time. Does anyone, I mean, is that doable? Anyone have an opposition to 1 to 3:45? Is that going to cause problems for anyone?
Works for
We
me.
don't, but you don't want to start it earlier?
I would try to block as much time as we can on that day, and
Okay. What's the earliest you can do?
Do 12, I can do 12:30. You want to do 12:30 to?
Just do like we did
Yeah.
today, basically?
12:30 to 3:45.
Perfect.
That's the max amount I can get out of that.
Okay, so what would make sense, let's cut off some of these, let's at least pick probably 1 or 2 of these things. What are the things that could be worked on quicker, I guess, that could be moved up to April 28th? And then I'll pull up my screen again.
April 26th.
Yep. I had the wrong day.
I think with staffing and caseload, we'd identified several people that would be bringing some things back for us to discuss and answer questions, and, yeah.
I think they could all be ready by that date.
do we need to finalize our supplemental salary recommendations
Oh, yeah, that's gotta be,
before we get into compensation? We
Well,
are
he just
meeting
means
tomorrow,
we need to bring them here.
yeah, what
but we need to
meeting-
bring them here
Right.
before
Right.
May, before we dive into.
So that's gonna have to
Before May
be,
9th.
that's gonna
Yeah.
have to
So
be,
then that can be on the 26th.
That could be the 26th.
okay.
We will not have a small human tomorrow, so.
Okay. Well,
Okay,
I'm
look.
bringing back some
I know we
homework
have tomorrow.
stuff for tomorrow, and I think Tara Mahoney was going to bring back some homework, so I'm really hoping that we can,
Well, we won't have that little person interjecting.
I'd like to get that done.
it's funny.
Okay, how is that looking? We have less issues now on May 9th, and the issues that may take a little bit more time.
Could the cell phone go on the 26th if the directors were available?
Probably, because that's pretty long. And that's not,
Because that's a little over 3 hours
Yeah.
of time.
okay,
Okay. And then myself, and I think we can talk to other NEA representatives here, to just be ready for everything else, meaning have my brain wrapped around it and ready to discuss. Because if
Okay.
we were to finish something on the 26th, I wouldn't want to be like, oh, we're done early. I'd want to be ready to,
yep.
frame and focus something else. Okay.
All right, I will,
We could reach out to Stephanie as well to first have the dates that we already have
yep,
and get a confirmation from her, and then to see if the 26th she would be available.
let's see. Okay, so these will be due dates. So I'm gonna send out calendar items for these. This one's just gonna be a hold, the May 23rd and 24th will be holds, but I'll go ahead and add this one on the 26th. And then I will I'll work up a joint statement and a TA and a collective commitment, so we can link the TA and the collective commitment in the joint statement. The other issue I need to add is, and I had put together sort of a rough outline, I'm gonna send it to you, Jill, but is that, brief summary or Q&A or whatever to go at the front of the P&A to like, hey, here's your very most basic, like, rights and obligations, but I thought what made sense is like, first, let me put together the outline, is this it, is this the major issues, so I'm gonna send that to you.
Right. That was discussed about new hires, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at some point, I don't want to add it yet because it might take a little bit of time, but I will at some point need to review that, and we'll need to have the TA to incorporate it into the P&A.
Right. And every year, I'm trying to think of things that sometimes we have to
Oh, yeah.
agree to every year because they sunset afterwards. One is the incentive to let the district know that you're planning to resign or retire by?
All the annual issues.
And maybe even a discussion on, do we want to ever consider doing that every year? Or
Yeah.
another solution?
Yeah, possible discussion of multi-year. And then need to add TA for summary somewhere. I will put this in like a nice thing and share it that's in our joint folder that's like, here's our agenda for coming meetings. In the joint statement, I only ever include the agenda for the next meeting, so I'll save this somewhere else and share it, so we can adjust it as we go.
Right. I know we're not still on the staffing and caseload, but I know that we had an MOU regarding teaching 5 out of 7.
Yep.
And so I would like to I don't know, see what we can do about discussing that. Because it was a 2022 to 2023 MOU, I believe.
Yes, we do need to do that. Including teaching 5 out of 7.
At the secondary level, gen ed. Well, I mean, it also talked about in there things that we were doing to help with the special education workload. So it ties
That could
into the staffing
potentially be
caseload.
updated. Okay.
I'm just trying to think of the things that we do year after year.
No, this is a good to-do list.
And I don't know if you ever want to look at, if we ever just skim through to see, are there other things at Sunset? Are there things, I don't know.
Yep. I will do,
That are-
before we get to this annual issue thing, I'll try and do a hunt and find. So I've already made a Word document that is this year's P&A with red line turned on so that every single change can be seen. I thought about converting that to Google Doc, but I'm like,
No.
again, a dinosaur. I'm so nervous.
I like Word documents.
I'm just so nervous because there's just more access to it. And so somebody could like inadvertently and it's annoying because when we're in the final phases, I'm like emailing out and you'll get like 5 emails that this is the final. No, this is the final. And it's really annoying, but at least it's protected that way. And like only one person can be working on it at any given time.
Well, somebody could accidentally delete it if it was.
Someone could accidentally delete it. So I was just like, no, I realize that that's probably the more modern way to do it, but it's too possible that changes could be made without, and it's also.
There might be some things you can
50-something
actually
pages.
turn on so that only you can make changes on
Yeah.
that specific Google Doc, but.
We could appoint like, okay, this person from the district, this person from the association has controls and no one else does. So we can think about that for future years. I also think that because this document has like literally through the generations, it has the most funky formatting. Like when it gets converted, it's gonna look terrible. It's gonna take days to like fix all the formatting, so.
Yeah, things don't convert well from Microsoft Word to Google Docs.
They do not.
So we'll kick that can down the road. So right now, the red line I'm making is just a Word doc. And all I did was go through and change the years, right? So I changed all the 22s to be 23s, but I'll do a hunt and find about everything that sunsets.
Okay.
Okay. And the agenda that I put in the shared folder will be editable by everyone. So if anyone else is like, oh, we forgot this, or add this in, like, feel free to do it. But I think this will be a good checklist to work off of over the next 2 months. We said we were gonna go till 4:15, but obviously we got derailed a little bit because we don't have a facilitator,
Right.
but, is there anything that anyone else wants to try and get done today? I think we were productive. I mean, I am glad we previewed all the remaining issues and then could at least get the ball rolling on them. I think that's really helpful. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I will go home and start doing some homework and hopefully get it out to y'all before it's too
And
late
then
tonight.
supplemental pay schedule tomorrow, and then mega subcommittee next Tuesday.
Yes, mega subcommittee.
I don't want to say the 4 different things that we're covering because it takes long.
You're good.
Okay.
All encompassing.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.